Hey everyone. Welcome back for part 2 of Hero from Another World. Enjoy, Chapter 4. The final intermission was the longest, a 30-minute break to allow the finalists to recover and for the stadium crew to construct a new, heavily reinforced stage. The entire stadium was buzzing, a low thrum of anticipation for the final showdown. It was the match everyone had been waiting for, a perfect narrative of overwhelming force versus untouchable skill. In his waiting room, Katsuki Bakugo was a storm contained. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't screaming. He was terrifyingly still, staring at his own reflection in the darkened window. He had watched Naruto's fight with Ida. He had seen the effortless redirection, the absolute, insulting calm. Every theory he had, every angry assumption, had crumbled to dust. This wasn't a quirk. This was something else. He didn't understand it, and the not knowing was a poison more potent than any rage. He knew he couldn't win with a simple trick or a single big blast. He had only one option left, to unleash a torrent of destruction so vast, so chaotic, that even a god would have to take a step back. Naruto, on the other side of the stadium, was finishing his third bowl of ramen, brought to him by a clone. He was calm, his mind clear. He saw this not as a fight to be won, but as a lesson to be taught. Bakugo was powerful, talented, and driven. But his power was a wild, untamed fire, fueled by rage and arrogance. It was a danger to himself and others. Naruto knew that to truly become a hero, Bakugo needed to be broken down. He needed to be humbled. And Naruto, the boy who had mastered the art of taming rampaging beasts, was uniquely qualified for the job. It's the moment we've all been waiting for. The grand finals of the UA Sports Festival. President Mike's voice was practically shaking with excitement. First, the walking volcano WHO blasted his way to the top, Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo walked onto the stage, his expression grim, his hands crackling with contained energy. And his opponent, the silent tsunami WHO, swept away all challengers without taking a single hit. The Phantom of Class 1A, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto walked out, his hands in his pockets, his expression giving nothing away. The two boys faced each other on the pristine concrete stage. Ready? Midnight raised her whip. Begin. Bakugo exploded. There was no feint, no strategy. It was a declaration of pure, unadulterated power. He launched himself forward, his hands blazing, unleashing a continuous, roaring jet of explosions to propel himself at blinding speed. Stun grenade, he roared, creating a blinding flash of light directly in front of Naruto's face. His plan was to disorient Naruto and follow up with a point-blank AP shot. But when the light faded, Naruto was gone. Looking for me? Naruto's voice came from directly behind him. Bakugo spun around, unleashing another blast, but Naruto was no longer there. He was now standing on the other side of the stage, his hands still in his pockets. Stop teleporting and fight me, you coward. Bakugo screamed, his frustration mounting. I haven't teleported once, Naruto replied calmly. You're just too slow to see me move. The comment was a match on a powder keg. Bakugo lost all semblance of control. He began to fly around the arena, a chaotic meteor shower of explosions, blanketing the entire stage in a relentless barrage. I'll blast you to bits. I'll blast this whole stage to bits. Naruto simply walked. Amidst the storm of fire and shrapnel, he moved with an unhurried grace. An explosion would detonate where he was about to step, but he would shift his weight at the last second, letting the blast harmlessly pass him by. A piece of flying concrete would hurtle toward his head, and he would tilt his neck just enough for it to miss by a millimeter. He wasn't dodging. He was flowing, moving through the chaos as if he were the only solid object in a world of smoke and fire. You're predictable, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the roar of explosions. Your rage makes you sloppy. You attack with everything, which means you're defending with nothing. Your flight path is erratic, but your target is always the same. You're not trying to win. You're just trying to hit me. Shut up. Bakugo screamed, gathering all his power for one final, desperate attack. He flew high into the air, spinning like a top. Howitzer impact. He launched himself downward, the ultimate move that had defeated Todoroki. It was an attack that could level a building. As the living missile descended, Naruto finally took his hands out of his pockets. He made a single hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A lone clone appeared in front of him. As Bakugo's attack was about to connect, the clone did something unexpected. It held up its hand and began to spin a swirling, blue sphere of pure energy. Rasengan. The two attacks met. Not in a massive explosion, but in a strange, grinding vortex of power. The Rasengan didn't overpower the howitzer impact, it absorbed it, spun it, and then dissipated it, the explosive energy unraveling into nothing. Bakugo was left hovering in mid-air, his ultimate move neutralized, his body exhausted, his mind completely broken. He stared at the blue sphere of energy that had consumed his power. What? What was that? He whispered. The clone vanished. The original Naruto looked up at the defeated boy. That was the difference between a tantrum and a technique. Naruto vanished in a yellow flash, appearing behind the exhausted Bakugo in mid-air. He didn't punch him. He didn't kick him. He simply placed a hand on his back. It's over, he said gently. He let Bakugo fall. Before he could hit the stage, another clone appeared below, catching him and laying him gently on the concrete. Bakugo lay there, panting, staring at the sky. He hadn't been beaten. He had been dismantled, educated, and ultimately, shown mercy. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast, empty silence. Bakugo is unable to continue. Midnight finally announced, her voice trembling. The winner of the UA Sports Festival is Naruto Uzumaki. The crowd's roar was deafening, but Naruto didn't hear it. He just looked at the boy he had just defeated, hoping the lesson had been learned. The closing ceremony was a surreal affair. The top 3 students stood on the winner's podium, but the mood was anything but celebratory. Todoroki accepted his third-place medal with a quiet, thoughtful dignity, his mind clearly elsewhere. Naruto stood at the top, his first-place medal hanging around his neck, looking as if he were waiting for a bus. The real spectacle was the second-place winner. Bakugo had to be forcibly restrained and chained to the podium, thrashing and screaming in a feral rage. This doesn't count, he roared, his voice hoarse. It's not a real win. Let me go. I'll kill you. He was furious not because he had lost, but because he hadn't been defeated honorably. He had been dismissed, and that was a fate worse than any loss. All Might, in his full hero form, stepped up to present the medals. He gave Todoroki a quiet word of encouragement and then approached Bakugo. Young Bakugo, he said, his voice gentle, you must accept this medal. In time, you will see this loss as a valuable lesson. I don't want your damn medal. Bakugo screamed. All Might, with a sigh, ended up hanging the medal on Bakugo's teeth. Finally, he stood before Naruto. The stadium was silent, all eyes on the symbol of peace and the boy who had overshadowed his entire festival. Young Uzumaki, All Might said, his voice filled with a complex mixture of awe and deep concern. I have never seen a performance like the one you gave today. You have shown us a new kind of power. He leaned in, his voice a low whisper for only Naruto to hear. But power like yours. It invites challenges. From all corners. Be ready. I'm always ready, Naruto replied, his voice equally quiet. All Might placed the gold medal around his neck. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar, a standing ovation for the undisputed, unbelievable champion. Perspectives and reactions. In a private box high above the stadium, Endeavor crushed the armrest of his chair into dust. His son had not only failed to win, but he had lost to a boy who had been toying with him. And the champion? The champion was an anomaly, a ghost who won without effort. This Uzumaki boy was not part of his calculations. He was a variable that threatened his entire life's ambition. He was an obstacle that would need to be removed. In another section of the stands, Mirko leaned forward, a wide, predatory grin plastered on her face. She had watched every second of Naruto's final match. She saw the effortless evasion, the perfect timing, the absolute control. But more than that, she saw the mercy. He hadn't hurt Bakugo. He had simply ended the fight. He's not just strong, she murmured to herself, her rabbit ears twitching. He's a true martial artist. A warrior. The desire to test her own strength against his was a burning fire in her gut. The internship offers were coming up. She knew exactly who she was going to pick. The hero net and social media. The internet was a wildfire of speculation and hot takes. The sports festival had been completely upended. Hero net news ticker, UA Sports Festival concludes. Naruto Uzumaki, the Phantom Rookie, takes first place in historic, dominant fashion. Trending on Chirper, hashtag Uzumaki Naruto hashtag Sports Festival hashtag Rasengan. At Quirk Theory Geek, okay, let's break it down. Uzumaki's quirk isn't one thing. It's at least 3. 1. Spatial displacement, teleportation. 2. Solid light clones, clones that can physically interact. 3. Some kind of energy manipulation, that blue sphere thing. This isn't a quirk. It's a collection of them. Hashtag multiple quirks. At ProHero_FatGum, verified, black check mark emoji, watch that final match. The kid's movement is unreal. He wasn't just dodging, He was predicting. And that final blue ball move. It didn't explode. It just erased the attack. Unbelievable control. At Combat Analyst 99, forget the quirks. Let's talk about the fight itself. Uzumaki vs Bakugo wasn't a fight. It was a masterclass. He never threw a single punch. He used Bakugo's own momentum and rage against him. He won with pure skill. That's scarier than any quirk. #martial arts #humbled. At Civilian Sue, am I the only one who thought he was being kind? Bakugo was going to seriously hurt himself, and Uzumaki just stopped him. It felt less like a victory and more like an intervention. He's not just powerful, he seems wise. The world had been introduced to Naruto Uzumaki. And the world was utterly captivated, confused, and terrified. In a single day, he had become the most famous first-year student in history, his name synonymous with a new, incomprehensible level of power. The lesson he had taught Bakugo had been broadcast to the entire planet. 2 days after the sports festival, a semblance of normalcy returned to UA High, though it was a new, altered kind of normal. The media horde at the gates had thinned, but the legacy of the festival lingered in the hallways. Class 1A was no longer just a group of students, they were celebrities, their faces recognized from the national broadcast. The internal dynamic of the class had been permanently redrawn. Bakugo was quieter, his explosive rage replaced by a simmering, introspective intensity. He trained harder, spoke less, and watched Naruto with a burning, analytical gaze. Todoroki seemed more at peace, though a quiet conflict still raged within him. He had begun to experiment with his fire in training, small, controlled bursts, as if getting acquainted with a long-lost part of himself. Aizawa, now mostly free of his bandages, rolled into the classroom in his yellow sleeping bag. "Settle down," he grumbled. "Good work at the festival. The world is watching you now. Don't get complacent." He stood up, his expression serious. "Today, we're choosing your hero names." A wave of excitement went through the class. This was a crucial step, the moment they would define their future identities as heroes. "This is a serious matter," Aizawa continued, his tone flat. "The names you choose now will likely stick with you for your entire careers. Choose wisely." He gestured to Midnight, who entered the room with her usual dramatic flair. "She'll be approving your names, as I have no aesthetic sense." One by one, the students went up to present their names. The sturdy hero, Red Riot, Kirishima declared, a name inspired by his idol, Crimson Riot. The everything hero, Krichi. Yaoyorozu announced. The hearing hero, Earphone Jack, Jiro said with a shrug. When it was Izuku's turn, he walked to the front, his hands trembling slightly. "I've decided," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I want to change the meaning of this name. I will be the hero. Deku." The class murmured, surprised that he would embrace the old insult. But Uraka cheered, and a new understanding passed through the room. It was an act of reclaiming his own story. Finally, it was Naruto's turn. He walked to the front, the classroom falling silent. What name would the boy with 100 quirks choose? He held up his whiteboard. On it was a single, elegant kanji character. "The shinobi hero, shinobi," he said simply. The class was confused. "Shinobi? What does that mean?" Kaminari asked. "It's an old word," Naruto explained, his voice calm. "From a time before quirks. It means one who endures, or one who is hidden. A person who moves in the shadows to protect the light." Midnight looked at the name, a thoughtful expression on her face. It was archaic, mysterious, and yet, it fit him perfectly. It was a name that promised skill over flash, substance over style. "I like it," she said, giving her approval. "It has a classic, dangerous ring to it." After the names were chosen, Aizawa projected the internship draft results onto the main screen. "These are the offers you've received from pro heroes. The more offers you have, the more the world has taken notice of you." The numbers were staggering. Shoto Todoroki, 4,123 offers. Katsuki Bakugo, 3,556 offers. Fumikage Tokoyami, 360 offers, and so on down the list. "Whoa! Todoroki and Bakugo are in a whole other league," someone shouted. "That's to be expected," Yaoyorozu noted. "Their quirks are powerful and visually impressive." Izuku looked for his name, his heart sinking. He had only received a handful of offers, most from small, underground agencies. His self-destructive power made him a huge risk. Then, Aizawa scrolled to the top of the list. Naruto Uzumaki, 15,487 offers. The room went completely silent. The number was so absurd it seemed like a glitch. He had received more offers than the rest of the class combined. 15,000? The entire class screamed in unison. He received offers from virtually every top-ranking hero in Japan, and several international agencies, Aizawa said, his voice a deadpan monotone. Including the number 2 hero, Endeavor. A wave of shock went through the room. Endeavor, who was notoriously arrogant and never took on sidekicks, had made an offer. Todoroki's fists clenched at his desk. And, Aizawa continued, a faint hint of surprise in his own voice, an unprecedented personal request from the number 5 hero, Mirko. The students gasped. Mirko was a lone wolf. She didn't have an agency. She didn't take on sidekicks. For her to make a personal offer was unheard of. You have 2 days to decide, Aizawa concluded. Choose the experience that will best prepare you for the hero you want to become. Later that day, Naruto stood on the school roof, looking out over the city. He held the list of offers in his hand. He saw Endeavor's name, a clear attempt to get close to him, to analyze and perhaps control the boy who had so effortlessly defeated his masterpiece of a son. He saw offers from heroes who wanted to study his quirk, from those who wanted to capitalize on his fame, and from those who were simply afraid of him. And then he saw her name. Mirko. The rabbit hero. He remembered her on the field at the USJ, her fierce eyes, her confident grin. She wasn't interested in his quirk. She was interested in his strength. She wasn't offering him a job. She was offering him a fight. A slow, genuine grin spread across Naruto's face. His choice was clear. The next day, the students of Class 1A submitted their internship choices. The decisions were varied and strategic. Izuku, after a long conversation with All Might, chose to intern with his former teacher, Gran Torino, a hero All Might both feared and respected. Todoroki, in a shocking act of defiance, accepted the offer from his father, Endeavor, deciding to confront his past head-on and learn what he could from the number 2 hero. Bakugo chose the denim-clad hero, Bastionist, an agency known for discipline and control, a choice that surprised everyone. When Naruto handed his form to Aizawa, the tired hero looked at the single name circled on the paper and raised an eyebrow. Mirko? Are you sure? She has no agency, no structure. She's a lone wolf. Her idea of training is likely to be a street brawl. I'm sure, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I'm not looking for structure. I'm looking for a challenge. Aizawa sighed, but signed off on the form. Arguing with Uzumaki was a pointless endeavor. As the final bell rang, Naruto packed his bag and walked out of the classroom. He moved with his usual unhurried pace, but as he approached the main gates of UA, he could hear it, a low roar, the sound of 100 voices all shouting at once. The media had returned, and this time, their numbers were staggering. The news of the internship pics had leaked. The moment he stepped past the school's security gate, the dam broke. A tidal wave of reporters, cameras, and microphones surged forward, surrounding him completely. It was a chaotic, suffocating swarm, the biggest media scrum anyone had ever seen for a single student. Uzumaki-san. Is it true you turned down over 15,000 offers? Why did you decline the offer from the number 2 hero, Endeavor? What does it say about your ambitions that you rejected the top agencies in the country? The questions were a chaotic barrage, but one question rose above the rest, shouted by a reporter with a prominent news network. Naruto Uzumaki. You declined thousands of offers, including one from the number 2 hero, only to accept a personal request from the lone wolf, Mirko. Why her? What can she possibly offer you that Endeavor can't? The swarm fell silent, all microphones pointing at him, all cameras focused on his face, waiting for the profound, strategic answer from the boy who had dominated the sports festival. Naruto stopped walking. He slowly turned his head, his calm blue eyes finding the camera of the reporter who had asked the question. A slow, impossibly cool grin spread across his face. He didn't offer a tactical analysis. He didn't speak of strength or challenge. He gave them an answer so simple, so unexpected, that it completely short-circuited their narrative. She's hot, he said. He held the reporter's gaze for a single, perfect beat, gave a slight, almost imperceptible wink directly into the camera lens, and then turned and continued his walk. The entire media corps was stunned into absolute silence. They had been expecting a soundbite about heroism, ambition, or strategy. They had received a one-liner worthy of a rock star. As Naruto disappeared down the street, the reporters finally snapped out of their stupor, shouting after him, but it was too late. He was gone. The moment was already viral. The Phantom Rookie wasn't just powerful and intelligent, he was unpredictable, unflappable, and impossibly cool. He didn't just play by his own rules, he set the entire game board on fire. Naruto's one-liner became the stuff of legend overnight. The clip of him winking at the camera after calling the number 5 hero hot was played on every news channel, dissected on every talk show, and turned into 1,000 different memes. The public reaction was a firestorm of amusement and shock. He was hailed as an icon of effortless cool, a boy so confident in his power that he didn't need to justify his decisions to anyone. In a penthouse apartment that took up the entire top floor of one of the city's most expensive skyscrapers, Rumi Usajiyama watched the clip for the 10th time and let out a loud, unrestrained laugh. Her apartment was less of a home and more of a high-tech gym with a view, featuring reinforced walls, a state-of-the-art sound system blasting rock music, and very little furniture. Ha! The little brat's got nerve, I'll give him that, she cackled, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. Her phone had been blowing up all evening with calls from other heroes and the Hero Commission, all asking what she was going to do about the disrespectful rookie. She'd told them all the same thing, to mind their own business. She wasn't offended. She was intrigued. He hadn't chosen her for prestige or for a structured education. He had chosen her because he saw a fellow predator. He was looking for a real fight, and she was more than happy to give him one. The first day of the internships arrived. While his classmates headed to bustling hero agencies, Naruto was given a simple address. It led him not to an office building, but to the opulent, gleaming lobby of the city's most exclusive residential tower. The concierge, after a nervous call upstairs, directed him to the penthouse elevator. The doors opened directly into Mirko's apartment. The space was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the entire city. Mirko was in the center of the room, dressed in her hero costume, lightly bouncing on the balls of her feet like a prize fighter warming up. "So, you finally showed up," she said, her voice a low, challenging growl. Her red eyes scanned him from head to toe. "I saw your little performance for the cameras. Cute. Glad you enjoyed it," Naruto replied, his hands in his pockets as he took in the apartment. "Nice place. A bit minimalist for my taste." "I don't spend a lot of time sitting down," Mirko shot back, a sharp grin on her face. "Now, let's get one thing straight, rookie. This isn't an internship. I don't do paperwork, I don't teach lessons, and I don't patrol for purse snatchers. You didn't come here to learn how to be a hero. You came here because you wanted a real fight. Am I wrong?" "You're not wrong," Naruto confirmed, his own grin matching hers. "Good," she said. "Then let's skip the orientation." In a blur of motion too fast for a normal eye to see, she launched herself across the room. There was no warning, no countdown. Her leg, a piston of pure muscle, was aimed directly at his head, a kick powerful enough to shatter concrete. Naruto didn't teleport. He didn't use a clone. He simply tilted his head to the side, the kick whistling past his ear, the wind from it ruffling his hair. He didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. Mirko landed silently, spinning around to face him, her grin widening into a feral, joyous snarl. He had dodged it. Effortlessly. "Oh yeah," she breathed, her voice filled with manic glee. "This is gonna be fun." The training had begun. Mirko's feral grin was a thing of terrifying beauty. "Good," she said again, her voice a low purr. "That means I don't have to hold back." What followed was not a spar. It was a hurricane. Mirko moved with a speed and ferocity that lived up to her rank as the number 5 hero. Her fighting style was pure, unrestrained aggression, a whirlwind of powerful, acrobatic kicks. She used the walls, the ceiling, and the sparse furniture as launch pads, turning the entire penthouse into a three-dimensional combat zone. Her Luna Fall axe kick, powerful enough to crater reinforced concrete, slammed down where Naruto's head had been a millisecond before. He swayed out of the way, a dancer avoiding a falling pillar. Her Luna Tihera scissor kick aimed to snap his neck, but he simply dropped into a low crouch, the attack whistling over him. "Stand still and fight me, you little rabbit," she roared, her voice filled with joyous frustration as she launched another series of kicks. "You're the one with the rabbit quirk," Naruto pointed out calmly, sidestepping another devastating blow. He still hadn't taken his hands out of his pockets. He was treating her like a typhoon, an elemental force to be weathered, not fought. He was analyzing her, reading her movements, her rhythm, the slight shift in her muscles before she launched an attack. "You're fast," he commented, easily ducking under a spinning heel kick. "And strong. But you're all offense. You leave yourself wide open with every attack. Doesn't matter if no one's fast enough to hit me." She shot back, using the rebound from a missed kick against a wall to launch herself at him from a new angle. This time, Naruto moved. As her leg shot toward his face, he finally took one hand out of his pocket. He didn't block. He didn't catch. He simply extended two fingers and lightly tapped the inside of her thigh. It was a small, almost insignificant touch. But a tiny, precise pulse of chakra accompanied it, targeting a key pressure point. Mirko's leg, a weapon of mass destruction, suddenly went numb. Her attack faltered, her momentum vanished, and her perfect acrobatic form crumbled. She stumbled, landing awkwardly on the floor, her leg refusing to obey her commands. She stared at her leg, then at him, her red eyes wide with disbelief. What? What did you just do? I turned it off, Naruto said simply, his hand already back in his pocket. Like I said. You leave yourself open. Mirko looked at him, panting slightly. The joyous fury in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, intense, and deeply impressed curiosity. He hadn't just dodged her. He hadn't just defended. He had dissected her fighting style, identified a weakness, and neutralized her primary weapon with a single, non-violent touch. She started to laugh. It began as a low chuckle and grew into a full-throated, unrestrained roar of pure delight. You are something else entirely, Naruto Uzumaki, she said, shaking her head as feeling slowly returned to her leg. She pushed herself up, her competitive fire burning brighter than ever. But it was different now. It wasn't the desire to crush a cocky rookie. It was the desire to dance with an equal. All right, pretty boy, she said, a genuine, challenging smile on her face. You've made your point. So, what now? You want me to teach you how to patrol? How to fill out paperwork? No, Naruto said, his own smile finally matching hers. You're going to fight me. Every day. You're going to come at me with everything you have. And what are you going to do? She asked, intrigued. I'm going to teach you how to win, he replied. The terms of their internship had been set. It wouldn't be a mentorship. It would be a partnership. A relentless, brutal, and exhilarating series of battles between two of the strongest fighters in the world. And in the crucible of combat, a new, dangerous, and undeniable connection was beginning to form. Their days fell into a brutal, exhilarating rhythm. Mornings were a whirlwind of combat in the penthouse, a chaotic dance where Mirko would unleash her full, unrestrained power, and Naruto would counter, evade, and gently, almost insultingly, neutralize her. He was teaching her, as promised. He showed her how to read an opponent's intent, how to conserve her stamina, and how to turn her pure offense into a calculated, inescapable assault. He was sharpening a weapon that was already one of the deadliest in the world. The afternoons were for recovery and analysis. They would sit on the floor of the rec department, surrounded by craters and broken furniture, eating takeout and reviewing footage of Mirko's past fights. See? Naruto would say, pointing a chopstick at a pause screen. You committed to the kick here, but you didn't have a follow-up planned. If that villain had been a half-second faster, you would have been wide open for a counter. Mirko shoved a piece of tempura in her mouth, chewing thoughtfully before pointing her own chopstick back at him. You know, you're the one on an internship here, she quipped, a playful fire in her red eyes. Why the hell am I the one learning everything and not you? Despite her teasing, she was a surprisingly diligent student. She absorbed his lessons with a fierce intensity, her respect for the boy growing with each passing day. She had never met anyone who could not only keep up with her but could also see through her, analyzing her fighting style with a depth that even she had never considered. On the fourth day of the internship, after a particularly intense morning session that ended with Mirko tangled in a net made by a dozen shadow clones, she finally called a halt. All right, pretty boy, that's enough, she said, panting as she pulled herself free. I'm getting tired of wrecking my own apartment. She tossed a towel at him. Get your costume on. We're going out. Oh? Naruto asked, catching it. A field trip? Don't get cute, she shot back, a feral grin on her face. This city is my training ground. It's time to take this show on the road. I want to see what you can do when the targets fight back. Patrolling with Mirko was nothing like the structured patrols of other agencies. There was no set route. They simply leapt from rooftop to rooftop, a high-speed tour of the city from above. Mirko moved with explosive, joyful bounds, while Naruto kept pace with silent, effortless ease. For a few hours, the city was quiet. Then, a frantic call came over the Hero network. A high-stakes robbery was in progress at a downtown jewelry exchange. A group of villains with powerful quirks had taken hostages and were holding off the local police. Finally. Some action, Mirko roared, her grin widening. She crouched, ready to launch herself across the city. Wait, Naruto said, holding up a hand. He closed his eyes for a moment. 5 villains. 1 with a gigantification quirk is acting as muscle at the front door. 2 with projectile quirks are providing cover from the second-floor windows. 1 has a barrier quirk and is guarding the hostages. The leader has some kind of vibration quirk. They're trying to break into the main vault. Mirko stared at him, her launch forgotten. How in the hell do you know that? A clone got there ahead of us, Naruto said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The police are pinned down. The heroes on scene can't get past the giant villain at the front. A direct assault is what they're expecting. So we give him one, Mirko said, pounding her fist into her palm. No, Naruto countered, his eyes sharp and analytical. We don't play their game. We play ours. He looked at her, a plan already fully formed in his mind. I need a distraction. A big one. Can you be a big, loud, terrifying distraction? Mirko's grin returned, more ferocious than ever. Kid, you have no idea. Good, Naruto said. Draw their fire. I'll handle the rest. Mirko didn't need to be told twice. She shot off the rooftop like a cannonball, her trajectory a direct line toward the jewelry exchange. She landed in the street in front of the building with a ground-shaking crash that cracked the pavement. Hey, uglies, she roared at the giant villain blocking the door. Hope you're ready for your ass kicking, 'cause the number 5 hero is here to deliver it personally. The giant villain roared back and charged. The 2 projectile villains in the windows immediately opened fire on her. Mirko became a whirlwind of motion, dodging, weaving, and delivering bone-shattering kicks, a one-woman army drawing the full attention of 3 of the 5 villains. While the chaos raged outside, Naruto simply appeared inside the building. He had used Hiraishin, teleporting to a specialized kunai a clone had silently placed on the roof an hour earlier. He was on the 3rd floor, above the fray. He moved silently through the halls, a ghost in the machine. He found the room where the hostages were being held, guarded by a man projecting a shimmering barrier of energy. Naruto didn't engage. He simply created a clone in the hallway behind the villain. The clone made a noise, and the barrier villain turned, distracted for a single, crucial second. In that second, Naruto phased through the wall, grabbed the hostages, and teleported them all outside to the waiting police before the villain even knew they were gone. He reappeared in the vault room, where the leader was using his vibration quirk to try and shake the massive door off its hinges. Who are you? The villain leader snarled, spinning around. The guy who's shutting you down, Naruto replied calmly. Before the villain could even raise his hands, Naruto was on him. A single, precise chop to the back of the neck, and the leader crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Outside, Mirko sent the giant villain flying with a devastating kick. The 2 projectile villains, seeing their leader defeated and the hostages gone, surrendered instantly. The entire incident, from Mirko's arrival to the capture of all 5 villains, had taken less than 2 minutes. The police swarmed the scene, their expressions a mixture of gratitude and sheer awe. Mirko landed next to Naruto, panting slightly, her body buzzing with adrenaline. Not bad, rookie, she said, clapping him on the back hard enough to stagger a normal person. Your little distraction plan worked. You were the distraction, Naruto corrected her. And you weren't bad yourself. She laughed, a loud, genuine sound that echoed in the street. Yeah, we make a pretty good team. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the aftermath of their effortless victory, a silent understanding passing between them. This partnership was more than just training. It was the beginning of a legendary new duo. The aftermath of the jewelry store incident was a whirlwind of flashing lights and official procedures. The police commissioner, a man with a walrus-like mustache, personally thanked Mirko for her swift response, all while giving Naruto a long, baffled look, unsure how to file a report on a boy who could apparently bend the laws of physics. Mirko handled the debrief with her usual brusque efficiency, but Naruto could see she was practically vibrating with unspent energy. The 2-minute fight had been an appetizer, and she was still hungry for a main course. All right, that's enough of that, she finally said, cutting the commissioner off mid-sentence. We're done here. She grabbed the back of Naruto's flak jacket. Come on, rookie. Debriefing. Before Naruto could protest, she launched herself into the air, dragging him with her. They landed on the roof of a nearby skyscraper, the sounds of the city a distant hum below them. Okay, she said, turning to face him, her hands on her hips. She had a look on her face that was a complex cocktail of emotions, 1 part immense respect, 1 part professional frustration, and 2 parts pure, unfiltered annoyance. First of all, she began, pointing a finger at his chest. That was a good plan. It worked. Flawlessly. Congratulations. She then started pacing back and forth like a caged rabbit. Second of all, don't you ever use me as a distraction again. I'm the number 5 hero. I'm the main event, the star player, the final boss. I am not the opening act for some teleporting teenager. Naruto just watched her, a faint, amused smile on his lips. But you were a very good distraction. Arg. She threw her hands up in the air, a gesture of pure exasperation that was surprisingly cute. You're impossible. You're supposed to be my intern. My sidekick. I'm supposed to be teaching you things. But all I've done this week is get my butt kicked in my own apartment and get used as bait. You're learning, Naruto said simply. Your kicks are getting more focused. You're not leaving yourself as open. He paused, a cheeky grin spreading across his face. Besides, it is a very nice butt. Mirko stopped dead in her tracks, her ears twitching. The frustration on her face melted away, replaced by a slow, dangerous grin. Oh, is that right, pretty boy? She purred, her annoyance instantly replaced by playful challenge. Keep talking like that, and you'll get a much closer look at it when I'm kicking you into next week. That's not the point. She retorted, her cheeks flushing slightly. The point is. She stopped pacing and glared at him. How are you so calm? We just took down 5 villains, saved a dozen hostages, and you look like you just woke up from a nap. Naruto's smile faded slightly. He turned to look out at the sprawling city below, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. I've been in worse fights, he said quietly. The simple, honest answer cut through Mirko's bluster. She stopped glaring and really looked at him. She saw the confidence, the power. But for the first time, she also saw the immense, ancient weight behind his eyes. He wasn't just a cocky kid. He was something else. Something old. Yeah, she said, her voice softening as she walked over to stand beside him at the edge of the roof. I bet you have. They stood there in a comfortable silence for a long moment, two powerful beings watching the city they protected. The fiery, competitive energy between them was still there, but it was now tempered with a new, unspoken understanding. So, Mirko said, finally breaking the silence, a playful smirk returning to her face. Since you're such a great teacher, what's on the lesson plan for tomorrow, sensei? Naruto looked at her, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Tomorrow, he said, I'm going to teach you how to dodge. Mirko's eyebrow twitched. I know how to dodge. No, Naruto corrected her, his grin widening. You know how to move. I'm going to teach you how to disappear. A thrill shot through her. It was a challenge. And there was nothing in the world Rumi Usajiyama loved more than a challenge, especially when it came from the infuriating, impossible, and utterly captivating boy standing next to her. The next morning, the sun had barely risen over the city skyline, but the atmosphere in Mirko's penthouse was already charged. The wreckage from their previous spars had been cleared away by a beleaguered cleaning crew, leaving a vast, open space. Mirko stood in the center, stretching her powerful legs, a look of fierce anticipation on her face. All right, sensei, she called out, her voice echoing in the large room. School's in session. Show me how to disappear. She put air quotes around the last word, her tone a mixture of genuine curiosity and playful mockery. Naruto was sitting on her lone sofa, calmly sipping a cup of tea. First lesson, he said, not looking at her. Patience. Mirko's eyebrow twitched. I'm not a patient person. I know, he replied. He set his cup down and stood up. That's the problem. He made a single hand sign. Poof. A single clone appeared beside him. Your objective is simple. You have to land a single, clean hit on me. My clone will be your opponent. I won't be fighting back. Just one clone? She asked, a dangerous grin spreading across her face. You're underestimating me, pretty boy. Am I? The original Naruto said as he walked to the far side of the room and sat back down on the sofa, picking up his tea. The lesson begins now. Mirko launched herself at the clone. It was a straightforward, powerful attack. But the clone didn't meet it. It simply took a single, small step to the side at the last possible second. Mirko's kick met empty air, and she had to use her incredible agility to land without crashing. Not bad, the clone said, giving her the same infuriatingly calm smile as the original. What followed was one of the most frustrating hours of Rumi Usajiyama's life. The clone never attacked. It never used any jutsu. It just dodged. It would take small, economical steps, use slight sways of its body, or subtle shifts in its posture to avoid her relentless assault. It was always just outside her reach, her most powerful kicks missing by a mere inch. Stand still, she roared, her frustration mounting. She was the fastest hero in Japan, and she couldn't land a single blow on a stationary target. I am standing still, the clone replied calmly, as it ducked under a spinning axe kick. You're the one flying all over the place. You're fighting my afterimage. You're so focused on where I am that you're not paying attention to where I'm going to be. From the sofa, the original Naruto spoke up. You're looking at his body. That's a rookie mistake. His body is just a tool to trick you. Watch his eyes. Watch his hips. Watch the shift in his weight. The intent to move comes before the movement itself. You're trying to react to the punch, not the decision to throw it. Mirko stopped, panting, her mind racing. She looked at the clone, who stood there, waiting. She remembered Naruto's fight with Bakugo, the way he had flowed through the storm of explosions. He wasn't just fast. He was perceptive on a level she couldn't comprehend. Again, she growled, her frustration now tempered with a new, fierce focus. This time, she didn't charge blindly. She moved slower, her red eyes narrowed, watching the clone with an intensity she usually reserved for A-rank villains. She saw it now, the subtle dip of a shoulder, the slight turn of a foot. Tiny tells that broadcasted his next move. She feinted a high kick. The clone's eyes flickered upward, its body preparing to duck. In that instant, Mirko changed her attack, her feint transforming into a low, sweeping kick. It was a brilliant move. And it almost worked. The clone, caught off guard for the first time, was forced to jump back to avoid the sweep. It was a larger movement than it had made the entire time. It had been forced to react. Mirko grinned, a real, triumphant grin. Getting warmer. You're learning, the clone acknowledged, a hint of respect in its voice. They continued for another hour, the dynamic shifting from a frustrating chase to a high-speed chess match. Mirko was beginning to understand. Dodging wasn't just about moving out of the way. It was about misdirection, about controlling your opponent's perception, about making them fight a ghost while you prepare the real attack. It was the art of the shinobi. Finally, covered in sweat but with a fire of understanding in her eyes, Mirko called a halt. Okay, she panted, walking over to the sofa and flopping down next to the original Naruto, her proximity much closer than professional courtesy would usually allow. I get it. You win, sensei. She leaned her head back, looking at him. So, what's the next lesson? How to make things go boom. Naruto looked at her, at the genuine excitement and respect in her eyes, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with chakra. No, he said, a playful smile on his face. Next, I teach you how to fall. I already know how to, she started to protest, but he cut her off. You know how to land, he corrected gently. I'm going to teach you how to fall, and get back up, without ever losing the fight. She just stared at him for a moment, then let out a short, happy laugh. This internship was going to be the best thing that had ever happened to her. The lesson on falling began not with a fight, but with a simple push. Naruto stood before Mirko, who had her arms crossed, a skeptical look on her face. All right, sensei, she said, her tone dripping with playful sarcasm. Teach me how to fall. I get kicked through buildings for a living, pretty boy. I think I know how to land. Landing is what happens at the end, Naruto corrected, his expression serious. Falling is the part in the middle. It's where you're most vulnerable. We're going to make it your strength. He created a single clone. The rules are the same as yesterday. Your opponent is the clone. My job, he said with a grin, is to trip you. Before she could retort, he darted forward with a flicker of speed and swept her legs out from under her. With her incredible agility and reflexes, she didn't crash. She twisted in mid-air, landing perfectly on her feet like a cat, ready for a fight. See? She said triumphantly. I landed. Yes, Naruto agreed. But you were on the defensive. Your momentum was broken. You had to reset. You lost the fight for a full second and a half. He then had the clone push him. As he fell backward, he didn't flail or try to land on his feet. He tucked his body, rolling backward onto his shoulder in a fluid, circular motion. His momentum wasn't stopped, it was converted. He came up on one knee, already coiled like a spring, in a perfect position to launch a counterattack. The entire movement was seamless. Mirko's jaw dropped slightly. She had seen countless heroes get knocked down, but she had never seen someone fall with such grace and purpose. It wasn't a failure of balance, it was a transition of movement. Okay, she said, a new fire in her eyes. I get it. Again. What followed was another hour of profound frustration and gradual learning for the number 5 hero. Naruto and his clones would relentlessly push her, trip her, and throw her off balance. At first, she would fight it, her pride refusing to let her fall. But slowly, she began to embrace it. She started to learn the art of ukemi, the break fall. She learned to roll with the momentum, to dissipate the force of an impact across her entire body, and to turn a defensive stumble into an offensive launch. Her penthouse once again became a disaster zone. She crashed into her expensive sofa, rolled over her coffee table, which shattered into a million pieces, and used her walls as springboards to recover her balance. Through it all, she was laughing, a wild, joyous sound. She was learning a skill that was completely new, a fundamental of combat she had never even considered. "You're a natural," Naruto commented as she flawlessly executed a forward roll after a clone had thrown her over its shoulder, coming up in a crouch with a grin on her face. "Of course I am." She shot back, panting slightly. "I'm a pro." She looked at him, her usual bravado softened by a genuine, infectious excitement. This is different. It's not about power or speed. It's about flow. Control. It's about making sure you are never, ever helpless, Naruto finished for her. As the sun began to set, they finally called a halt. They sat on the floor in the middle of the wreckage, sharing a pizza that a clone had been sent to retrieve. The usual fiery, competitive tension between them had settled into a comfortable, easy camaraderie. "So," Mirko said after swallowing a large bite of pizza. "Dodging, falling. What's next on the curriculum, teach? You gonna show me how to make that cool blue energy ball?" Naruto chuckled. "No. That's a bit advanced for you." She playfully punched his arm. "Brat." She leaned back on her hands, looking at him. The setting sun cast a warm, orange glow on his face, and for a moment, the ancient warrior in his eyes was replaced by the simple, undeniable charm of the boy he was. Her smile softened. "You know, for an infuriating, know-it-all kid. You're not so bad, Naruto Uzumaki." "You're not so bad yourself," he replied, his own smile genuine. "For a reckless, loudmouthed rabbit." She just laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet apartment. Their internship was half over, but their partnership was just beginning. The final days of the internship were a blur of controlled chaos and shared meals. The lesson on falling had evolved into a lesson on perception. The next morning, Naruto handed Mirko a black blindfold. "No way," she said, her arms crossed. "You're not getting the drop on me just because I can't see." "You don't need to see," Naruto countered, tying a matching blindfold over his own eyes. "You need to feel. The world is noisy. A person's intent makes a sound long before their body moves. You just have to learn how to listen for it." He created a single, also blindfolded, clone. Same rules as before. Land one hit. What followed was an exercise in pure sensory deprivation. Mirko, stripped of her greatest asset, her sight, was initially lost. She would lunge at the sound of a footstep, only to meet empty air. She relied on her hearing, but the clone was so silent, so controlled, that it was almost useless. "Stop listening with your ears," Naruto's voice instructed from the sidelines. "Listen with your skin. Feel the air move. Feel the vibrations in the floor. He's a part of the environment. Feel the disturbance he creates just by existing." Slowly, she began to understand. She stood perfectly still, her powerful body relaxed, her rabbit ears twitching, sensing. She felt a subtle shift in the air pressure to her left. She didn't lunge. She just moved, her fist shooting out in a short, precise jab. It connected solidly with the clone's shoulder. The clone dissipated in a puff of smoke. Mirko stood there, panting, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph on her face. She ripped off her blindfold. "I did it." Naruto pulled his own blindfold down, a proud smile on his face. "You did." Their training was interrupted by a high-level alert. A group of terrorists with advanced weaponry had taken over a television broadcast station, turning the upper floors into a fortified death trap with dozens of hostages. The police had the building surrounded, but couldn't breach the defenses. "Looks like our lesson is over for today," Mirko said, her expression shifting from playful student to focused pro. "No," Naruto said, pulling on his flak jacket. "The final exam is about to begin." They arrived on the scene to find controlled chaos. The police had a perimeter, but the villains were dug in deep. "They've got hostages on the top 3 floors, the police captain told them. Their leader has some kind of disintegration quirk. He says if anyone tries to come up the elevators or the stairs, he'll start executing people. We're completely pinned down." Mirko looked at the skyscraper. "A frontal assault is suicide." "Who said anything about the front door?" Naruto asked with a grin. He tossed her one of his specialized kunai. "Going up?" Before she could ask what he meant, he grabbed her arm and vanished in a yellow flash. They reappeared on the roof of the building, the wind whipping around them. Mirko stumbled for a second, her mind reeling from the instantaneous travel. "You have got to warn a girl before you do that." "No time," Naruto said, his voice all business. "They know we're here now." He pointed down. "They'll expect an attack from the roof. So you'll give them one. Be the loudest, most terrifying distraction you can be. I'll handle the hostages." Again with the distraction plan. She complained, though there was no heat in it. A wild, excited grin was already on her face. Fine. But you owe me dinner. Someplace fancy. It's a date, he shot back with a wink. With a roar, Mirko leapt off the roof, crashing through a window several floors below, her arrival a shocking explosion of glass and fury. The villain's attention was immediately drawn to the rampaging rabbit hero tearing through their defenses. While the chaos raged, Naruto moved like a ghost. He used clones to silently neutralize the guards on each floor, his movements precise, his takedowns non-lethal. He found the main group of hostages huddled in the broadcast studio, the disintegration quirk user holding a gun to a news anchor's head. The villain didn't even see him coming. A single touch to a pressure point, and he was unconscious. The entire building was secured in under 3 minutes. Later, they stood on the roof again, watching the police lead the captured villains away. The city lights twinkled below them, a sea of stars. You know, Mirko said, breaking the comfortable silence. She leaned against the railing, looking at him, her usual fiery energy replaced by a soft, genuine warmth. When you said you'd teach me how to win, I thought you were just being a cocky little brat. I am a cocky little brat, he replied with a smile. Yeah, you are, she laughed. But you're also the most incredible fighter I've ever met. You've taught me more in a week than I've learned in the last 5 years. She nudged his shoulder with her own. Thanks, Naruto. Anytime, Rumi, he said, using her first name for the first time. It felt natural. She just smiled, a soft, genuine expression that made her look younger, happier. The internship was ending, but for the two of them, standing on a rooftop overlooking the city they both protected, it felt like something new was just beginning. The final night of the internship was supposed to be their date. Naruto, true to his word, had a clone make a reservation at one of the most exclusive, highest-rated restaurants in the city, a place with a months-long waiting list that the clone had bypassed with a combination of a well-placed illusion and a sob story about a dying grandmother that was surprisingly effective. Mirko had actually dressed up, swapping her hero costume for a stunning black dress that did little to hide her powerful physique. Naruto wore a simple, well-fitted black suit. As they sat at a private table overlooking the glittering city, an odd, comfortable silence settled between them. They weren't a hero and an intern anymore. They were just Rumi and Naruto. So, she said, a playful smirk on her lips as she sipped her drink. Is this how all your dates go? A week of kicking their butts followed by a 5-star meal? Only the good ones, he replied with a grin. Their easy banter was cut short by a sudden, jarring vibration. A news alert lit up a nearby television screen. The headline was stark: Chaos in Hasu City. Multiple villains, possibly Nomus, attacking. Heroes overwhelmed. The playful atmosphere vanished instantly. Mirko was on her feet, her expression shifting to that of a focused predator. Naruto was already pulling out one of his Hiraishin kunai. So much for dinner, she growled, her voice a low thrum of frustration and battle-ready excitement. The night's still young, Naruto said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Let's go take out the trash. In a yellow flash, they were gone, leaving behind a very confused waiter and a very expensive, untouched meal. Meanwhile, in a dark, grimy alley in the heart of Hasu City, Tenya Ida was bleeding. He lay against a brick wall, his leg armor shattered, his body trembling. Standing over him was the man he had been hunting all week, the hero killer, Stain. You are a fake, Stain hissed, his voice a rasping, fanatical whisper. He licked the blood from his long, serrated blade. You don't carry the title of ingenium to save others. You carry it for vengeance. And that is why you will die here. Ida had found him. He had tracked down the man who had crippled his older brother, Tensei. But his quest for revenge had been foolish. Stain was on another level entirely. His speed, his skill, his blood-curdling quirk that paralyzed his victims, Ida was completely outmatched. Stain raised his blade for the final blow. But before he could strike, a jet of brilliant orange flame shot down the alley, forcing him to leap back. Shoto Todoroki stood at the entrance to the alley, his left side ablaze, his phone in his hand. I got your location data, Ida. It seems you've found yourself in some trouble. Todoroki. Stay back, Ida cried out. You don't understand. His quirk. I understand that a classmate is in danger, Todoroki said, his voice cold as he sent a wave of ice to counter Stain's charge. And a hero saves those who are in danger. The battle was joined. Todoroki's immense power kept Stain at a distance, but the hero killer was incredibly agile, weaving through the torrents of fire and ice, his blades flashing as he looked for an opening. At the same time, just a few blocks away, Izuku Midoriya was fighting for his life. His mentor, Gran Torino, was engaged with a monstrous, winged Nomu. Izuku, trying to help, had been snatched by another Nomu and was being carried into the sky. He struggled, but the creature's grip was like iron. He remembered his training. He remembered Naruto's words. It's not about your arm. It's about your everything. He stopped trying to punch it. He focused, letting one for all flow through his entire body, not just a single limb. Green lightning crackled around him. Full cowling, he roared. With a burst of newfound speed and strength, he ripped himself free from the Nomu's grasp. He was falling, but he was in control. He used his new power to leap from wall to wall, a green blur moving through the burning city. He had to get back to Gran Torino. He had to help. The city of Hasu was a war zone. And Class 1A, scattered and outmatched, was right in the middle of it. The heart of Hasu City was a scene from a nightmare. Sirens blared, buildings burned, and the monstrous, screeching forms of Nomus rampaged through the streets. Into this chaos, Naruto and Mirko appeared in a silent flash of yellow light, landing atop a skyscraper overlooking the main plaza. Their appearance was jarringly out of place. Amidst the smoke, fire, and rubble, they stood pristine, a boy in a sharp black suit and a woman in a stunning black dress, looking for all the world like they had just stepped out of a high society gala. Okay, Mirko said, her eyes scanning the battlefield below, her playful demeanor gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a predator. I count 3 of those ugly things. I'll take the big one with the wings. You handle the other 2. No, Naruto said, his gaze distant. My friends are in trouble. He could feel their energy signatures, Ida's, faint and flickering, Todoroki's, a raging torrent of hot and cold, and Izuku's, a brilliant, crackling green that was moving fast. They were all concentrated in one spot, a few blocks away. I'm going to them. You handle the party here. Hey! Don't you go giving me orders, brat. She shot back, but there was no anger in it. A feral grin was already on her face. Fine. Go save your boyfriends. Leave the real work to me. With a powerful leap, she launched herself from the roof, a black-clad missile aimed at the winged Nomu. Naruto took a breath and vanished, teleporting to a kunai he had a clone throw moments before. He appeared at the mouth of a dark, narrow alley, just in time to see a flash of green lightning. Izuku, in his full cowling state, shot down the alley wall and delivered a powerful kick to the hero killer's face, knocking him away from a downed Todoroki. Midoriya, Todoroki yelled, struggling to his feet. I'm here to help, Izuku declared, landing between his friends and Stain. Another fake, Stain hissed, wiping a trickle of blood from his mouth. So many of you tonight. This city must be purged. 3 against 1, Izuku said, his body crackling with power. You can't win. The numbers mean nothing when you lack conviction, Stain retorted, ready to lunge again. He's right, a new, calm voice said. All 3 boys turned. Naruto stood at the entrance of the alley, his hands in the pockets of his suit pants, looking completely unfazed by the carnage around him. Naruto-kun, Izuku gasped. What are you doing here? And why are you wearing a suit? Dinner plans got interrupted, Naruto said simply. He looked past them at Stain. Hero killer, right? You've been busy. Stain's eyes, wide and fanatical, narrowed as he took in the newcomer. He couldn't sense any power, any quirk. Just an unnerving, bottomless calm. And who are you? Another child playing hero? Something like that, Naruto replied. He looked at his 3 classmates, Ida, paralyzed and bleeding, Todoroki, exhausted from his fight, and Izuku, running on pure adrenaline. You guys did good holding him off. I'll take it from here. Before anyone could protest, he moved. He wasn't a flash. He wasn't a blur. He just flowed forward, closing the distance between himself and Stain in an instant. Stain, with his incredible speed, lunged with his blade. Naruto simply tilted his head, the blade missing by a fraction of an inch. He continued to walk forward, weaving through Stain's frantic, desperate slashes without ever seeming to rush. It was like watching a river flow around a rock. What? What is this? Stain hissed, his attacks growing wilder. Why can't I hit you? You're trying too hard, Naruto said, his voice conversational. He reached out, caught Stain's wrist, twisted it with a sharp, precise movement that sent the blade clattering to the ground, and in the same fluid motion, tapped 2 fingers against Stain's forehead. You're done. Stain's eyes went wide, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Silence. Izuku, Todoroki, and Ida stared, completely dumbfounded. They had just been in a desperate fight for their lives against a legendary villain, and Naruto had ended it in 10 seconds, without a single punch, while wearing a formal suit. High above, a news helicopter's camera zoomed in, broadcasting the surreal scene to the entire nation. The image was unforgettable: 3 battered student heroes, a defeated supervillain, and a boy in a suit standing over him as if he just finished a business meeting. Todoroki finally found his voice, his gaze flickering from the defeated Stain to Naruto's pristine suit. "Uzumaki. Your clothes," he said, unable to form a coherent question. Naruto looked down at his suit as if noticing it for the first time, then back at his friends. A slow, cheeky grin spread across his face. "Had plans," he said simply. "Don't wait up." Naruto's cryptic "don't wait up" hung in the alley for a moment before he vanished in another yellow flash, leaving his 3 battered classmates standing over the unconscious form of the hero killer. Did he just leave?" Ida stammered, his mind struggling to catch up with the sheer absurdity of the situation. Before anyone could answer, the alley was flooded with pro-heroes. Gran Torino zipped in, followed by a phalanx of police and, moments later, the towering, flame-wreathed figure of Endeavor. They arrived ready for a war, only to find the battle already over. Endeavor's eyes took in the scene: his son, exhausted but standing, the son of his rival's successor, battered but defiant, the younger Ida, injured, and the notorious hero killer, defeated. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "Who defeated him?" It was Uzumaki," Todoroki said, his voice flat. The name silenced Endeavor. He looked around, but Naruto was gone. The boy had taken down the most wanted villain in the country and hadn't even stayed to take credit. The act was so contrary to Endeavor's own glory-seeking nature that he couldn't comprehend it. The aftermath was a bureaucratic nightmare. The 3 students were taken to the Hasu police station, where they were met by the city's dog-faced police chief, Kenji Tsurugame. Normally, the use of quirks without a license in a combat situation is a severe criminal offense, the chief began, his tone stern. However, given the circumstances, the fact that you saved multiple pro-heroes, including Ingenium, and that no civilians witnessed the final confrontation, we are prepared to overlook the matter. He leaned forward. Officially, the hero killer was defeated and apprehended by the number 2 hero, Endeavor. The 3 of you are simply hostages who were rescued. This is the story that will be released to the public. It will protect you from legal repercussions. Ida and Todoroki looked down, ashamed but understanding. It was the logical choice. "No," Izuku said, his voice quiet but firm. "That's not right. If we hadn't acted, Native and Ida would be dead. The credit should go to the one who saved us." "And who would that be, Midoriya?" the chief asked tiredly. "The boy in the suit who defeated a legendary villain in 10 seconds and then vanished from the scene without giving a statement? How do we explain that to the world?" Before the argument could continue, a frantic officer burst in. "Chief! Out back! It's Stain!" They rushed outside just in time to see the winged Nomu that Mirko had been fighting swoop down from the sky, its talons snatching the struggling Izuku. But before it could fly away, a blur of motion shot past the police. Stain, who had somehow regained consciousness, had broken free. He threw a knife with pinpoint accuracy, piercing the Nomu's brain and killing it instantly. The creature fell, releasing Izuku. Stain stood over the dead monster, his presence immense, his fanatical eyes burning with a terrifying light. "All of this is to create a stronger society," he rasped, his voice carrying an eerie power. "The word hero has lost its meaning. All that matters is fame and money. You fakes. I will purge you all. The only one who is worthy, the only one who is allowed to kill me, is a true hero. All Might." His killing intent was so powerful it froze everyone in place, the police, the heroes, even Endeavor. Then, one of his old rib injuries punctured a lung, and he fell unconscious once more. The hero killer had been defeated, but his ideology had just been broadcast to the world. In the chaotic aftermath of Stain's final, desperate speech, as police and heroes swarmed the scene, Naruto vanished from the Hasu back alley without a sound. He reappeared in another yellow flash on the rooftop where he had left Mirko, who was just finishing a call with the police commissioner, her back to him. She had single-handedly defeated 2 Nomus and cornered the 3rd before the other pros had even arrived. Yeah, the situation is handled," she was saying into her phone, her voice brusque. "The property damage is extensive. Send the bill to my office." She hung up and turned, sensing his presence. "About time you got back. Did you find your friends?" "They're fine," Naruto said simply. "The hero killer is down." Mirko's eyebrows shot up. "You took down Stain? By yourself?" "He was monologuing," Naruto said with a shrug. "It gave me an opening." She stared at him for a long moment, a slow, appreciative grin spreading across her face. You leave your date for 5 minutes and you go and catch the most wanted villain in the country. You don't do anything halfway, do you, pretty boy? I try not to, he replied, holding out his hand. Now, about that dessert? She laughed, a loud, genuine sound that seemed to cut through the tension of the night. She took his hand. Lead the way, sensei. In another flash, they were gone from the smoky rooftops of Hasu and back in the opulent, quiet restaurant. They reappeared in a private alcove near their table. The waiter, who had been nervously hovering nearby, nearly jumped out of his skin. A shadow clone, still seated at their table, looked up and gave the original Naruto a nod before dissipating in a puff of smoke. Your table is ready, sir, the waiter stammered, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. See? Naruto said to Mirko as he pulled out her chair. Seamless. She just shook her head, a bemused smile on her face as she sat down. You are an absolute menace. The rest of their meal was a bubble of peace in a city that was still reeling. The adrenaline of battle slowly faded, replaced by the warm buzz of expensive wine and easy conversation. They talked, not as heroes or interns, but as people. She told him stories of her early days as a hero, the brutal fights and the hard-won victories. He listened, and in return, offered small, carefully curated stories of his own, tales of special training in remote villages and eccentric teachers that were true enough in spirit, if not in detail. So, she said, leaning forward, her red eyes sparkling in the candlelight. That little trick you did on Stain. The one-touch knockout. You gonna teach me that one? No, he said, a cheeky grin on his face. That's a trade secret. Oh, is it now? She purred, her voice a low challenge. Maybe I can find a way to persuade you. You can try, he shot back, his gaze unwavering. The playful, electric tension between them was more palpable than any quirk. They were two predators, perfectly matched, who had found in each other a rare and exhilarating equal. Later, as they left the restaurant, a photographer hiding across the street snapped a single, perfect picture, the two of them, laughing, silhouetted against the city lights. They were completely unaware. For them, it was just the end of a chaotic but successful night. For the rest of the world, it was the photo that would launch 1,000 headlines. The storm was coming, but for now, they were just Rumi and Naruto, enjoying the quiet end to a very loud date. The morning after the Hasu incident, the world woke up to a media firestorm. The official story, a heavily sanitized report crediting Endeavor with the capture of the hero killer, was the lead story on every major network. But it was a story that no one believed. The grainy helicopter footage of a boy in a suit effortlessly defeating Stain had already gone viral. Then, the photograph hit the internet. It was a single, perfect shot, clearly taken by a professional paparazzo. It showed Naruto and Mirko leaving a 5-star restaurant, caught in a moment of shared, genuine laughter. The city lights twinkled behind them, creating a halo effect. It was intimate, candid, and utterly damning to the official narrative. The story wrote itself, and it was 1,000 times more compelling than the official report. The Phantom Rookie and the Rabbit Hero, two of the most powerful and mysterious figures in Japan, were on a secret date. They abandoned their dinner to go save a city. She fought an army of monsters while he, without breaking a sweat or even changing out of his suit, took down the country's most wanted villain. The internet didn't just explode, it achieved supernova. HeroNet news ticker, the Hasu Truth, leaked photo confirms UA's Naruto Uzumaki and pro-hero Mirko were together before incident. Public demands answers. Trending on Chirper, hashtag power couple hashtag Hasu Truth hashtag Naruto and Mirko hashtag dinner, date, Stain. At Gossip Girl, I broke the story. The photo is confirmed. They were on a date. This is the greatest hero love story of our time. Hashtag power, couple. At Quirk Watcher 24, so Endeavor officially caught Stain, but Uzumaki was on a date with Mirko, and they both just happened to show up in Hasu and defeat all the villains? Yeah, right. The HPSC is in full cover-up mode. Hashtag Hasu, truth. At Combat Analyst 99, let's be real. Mirko is a beast, and Uzumaki is a monster. The two of them together could probably take down a small country. This isn't a couple, it's a strategic alliance that makes them the most dangerous duo on the planet. At Civilian Sue, I don't care about the fight, the photo is so romantic. They look so happy. I ship it. Hashtag Narumi. The reaction at UA High was one of stunned, reverent silence. The students of Class 1A gathered in the common room before class, staring at a tablet displaying the now famous photo. No way, Kaminari whispered, his eyes wide. He was on a date. With the number 5 hero? It certainly explains the suit, Yaoyorozu noted, her analytical mind trying to process the social implications. So manly, Kirishima declared. Taking your date to go fight supervillains. Uraka just stared at the photo, a faint blush on her cheeks. They actually look really good together. Bakugo just grunted, a new layer of frustration added to his already complex feelings about Naruto. The guy was not only impossibly powerful, but he was also apparently dating one of the top heroes in the country. The gap between them felt less like a gap and more like a chasm. When Naruto and Mirko arrived at UA to give their official statements, a formality, at this point, they were met with a wall of cameras and reporters that made the post-sports festival scrum look like a polite tea party. Mirko. Is it true you're dating your intern? Uzumaki. What's the real reason you chose Mirko over Endeavor? What is the nature of your relationship? Are you forming a new hero team? Naruto just grinned at the reporter who asked the second question. I told you, he said, his voice carrying easily over the din. She's hot. The comment sent a fresh wave of chaos through the media scrum. Mirko, who normally would have kicked a camera out of a reporter's hand, just laughed, a dangerous, playful light in her eyes. She slung an arm around Naruto's shoulders, pulling him in close. No comment, she said, her voice a low purr. But I will say this, the kid's got good taste. She then dragged him through the crowd, leaving the media in a state of absolute frenzy. The internship week was over. The world had been saved. And Naruto Uzumaki and Rumi Usajiyama were now, officially, the biggest story in the world. Their lives, and their relationship, would never be the same. Chapter 5. The return to UA after the internships was a return to a world that had been fundamentally altered. The students of Class 1A were no longer just students, they were rookies who had faced down legendary villains and survived. They carried themselves with a new, hard-won confidence. But all of that paled in comparison to the new reality surrounding Naruto Uzumaki. He had become a phenomenon. His relationship, real or imagined, with Mirko was the subject of endless magazine articles and talk show segments. He was a household name, and his presence in the classroom was like having a rock star in homeroom. So, spill it, Uzumaki. Mina Ashido said, leaning over his desk the morning they returned, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Was it a real date? Is she as cool as she seems? She's cooler, Naruto replied with a lazy grin, offering no other details, which only fueled the speculation. The easy atmosphere was cut short when Aizawa entered, his presence instantly silencing the room. The internships are over, he said, his voice flat. From now on, the focus is on your final exams. A collective groan went through the class. Don't relax, Aizawa continued, a grim look on his face. The final will consist of a two-part test, a written exam, and a practical combat exam. He smirked, a chilling expression. And for the practical, you will be working in teams of 2. Against one of the UA teachers. A wave of shock and excitement went through the room. Fighting a pro hero? It was the ultimate test. The teams have been chosen based on a variety of factors, including skill, temperament, and the need to push certain students out of their comfort zones, Aizawa explained as the pairings appeared on the screen. The list was full of interesting, and challenging, matchups. Uraka was paired with Aoyama. Yaoyorozu found herself with the stoic Todoroki. But it was the final 2 pairings that made the entire class hold its breath. Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo vs All Might. A stunned silence fell over the room. The 2 most volatile rivals in the class, forced to team up against the most powerful hero in the world. Bakugo and Izuku stared at the screen, then at each other, their expressions a mixture of horror and furious determination. And finally, Aizawa said, his tired eyes landing on Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki vs Principal Nezu. The class was baffled. Principal Nezu? Kirishima whispered. But his quirk is just high spec. He's super smart, but how is he a combat opponent? Naruto, however, didn't look relieved. A slow, intrigued grin spread across his face. He understood immediately. This wasn't a test of power. Aizawa hadn't paired him against a physical powerhouse like All Might or Mirko. He had paired him against a super genius. This was a battle of wits, a chess match against a grandmaster. The test will take place in a variety of simulated environments, Aizawa continued. Your goal is to either capture your teacher opponent or for one member of your team to escape through a designated gate within the time limit. That is all. Prepare yourselves. Later that day, Naruto was on the roof, looking out over the city, when a new presence appeared beside him. It was Mirko. Heard you're fighting a rat for your final, she said, her tone teasing. The smartest rat in the world, Naruto corrected, not taking his eyes off the horizon. Aizawa is clever. He knows a battle of strength against me is pointless. So he's testing my mind. You'll win, she said, her confidence in him absolute. She leaned against the railing next to him, their shoulders almost touching. I came to warn you. The Hero Commission is in a panic. The Hasu incident, you, me. We've upset their neat little world. They're watching you. Closely. Let them watch, Naruto said. They won't see anything I don't want them to. Cocky brat, she chuckled, nudging him with her shoulder. So, after you pass your exam. That restaurant owes us a dessert. It's a date, he replied, a genuine smile on his face. The battle lines were drawn. Izuku and Bakugo had to learn to work together to survive against a god. And Naruto had to outthink a super genius who held all the cards. The final exams were about to begin, and they would test the students of Class 1A in ways they could have never imagined. The day of the practical exams arrived, and the air at UA was thick with a nervous, competitive energy. The first team to be tested was Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. They were transported to a massive, simulated urban environment, a sprawling cityscape of empty streets and towering, silent buildings. Your objective is simple, All Might's voice boomed from unseen speakers, echoing through the empty city. Either affix these capture cuffs to me, or one of you must escape through the designated gate at the far end of the city. You have 30 minutes. Your exam starts. Now. The moment the timer started, the fragile truce between the two rivals shattered. Stay out of my way, Deku, Bakugo snarled, his hands already crackling with small explosions. I'm going to beat him myself. I don't need a useless, quirkless wannabe holding me back. Kachan, wait. Izuku pleaded, trying to reason with him. We can't win in a direct fight. He's All Might. Our only chance is to work together and run for the exit gate. Run? Bakugo's voice was a low, dangerous growl. A hero never runs. I'm going to win. The right way. Before Izuku could argue further, a blur of motion slammed into Bakugo, sending him flying down the street. All Might appeared before them, not with his trademark smile, but with a grim, determined expression. He was wearing heavy training weights on his arms and legs, a handicap that did little to diminish his overwhelming presence. If you think of this as just an exam, All Might said, his voice a low rumble, you will fail. Think of me as a villain. And I have no intention of letting you win. Bakugo roared, launching himself at the hero with a massive explosion. AP shot. All Might didn't even bother to dodge. He simply raised an arm, swatting the focused blast aside as if it were a pesky insect. He then grabbed Bakugo by the face and slammed him into the pavement, the impact cracking the asphalt. Kachan, Izuku yelled, his fear momentarily overridden by instinct. He activated full cowling, green lightning arcing across his body, and shot forward, aiming a kick at All Might's side. All Might turned, catching Izuku's leg in one hand. Good speed, young Midoriya, he said calmly. But your power is still a whisper compared to the storm. With a flick of his wrist, he threw Izuku into a nearby building. The two boys were utterly, completely outmatched. Every attack they launched was useless. Every attempt to move was countered. All Might was a wall, an immovable object of pure power. He wasn't just fighting them, he was systematically dismantling their confidence, showing them the vast, terrifying gap between a student and the number one hero. Bakugo, bruised and battered, pulled himself from the crater he'd made. He looked at the approaching hero, then at Izuku, who was struggling to get up. The rage in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, desperate fury. He hated this. He hated being weak. But more than anything, he hated the idea of losing. Deku. He barked, his voice raw. Izuku looked up, surprised. What's the plan? Bakugo growled, not looking at him. You're the damn nerd who mutters and analyzes everything. So, what's the stupid plan to get us out of this? It was the closest he had ever come to admitting he needed help. Izuku stared for a moment, shocked. Then, a slow, determined grin spread across his face. He remembered his training. He remembered Naruto's lessons. He had a plan. A reckless, stupid, and probably suicidal plan. But it was the only one they had. Okay, Kachan, Izuku said, pushing himself to his feet. Here's what we're going to do. All Might watched them, a flicker of pride in his eyes. The lesson was beginning to sink in. They were no longer two rivals. They were a team. In the observation room, the students of Class 1A watched the monitors, their expressions a mixture of awe and terror. They were witnessing a live-action lesson in the vast, crushing difference between a student and the symbol of peace. They're getting destroyed, Kirishima said, his voice grim. There's no way they can win. Don't be so sure, a quiet voice said. Naruto was leaning against the back wall, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the main screen. The dynamic just shifted. Look. On the screen, Izuku was rapidly explaining his plan to a scowling Bakugo, who listened with a surprising, begrudging intensity. You're the main assault, Kachan, Izuku said, his voice fast and focused. You have to be a big enough threat that he can't ignore you. I need you to draw all his attention. I'm going to make a run for the gate, but I'm not fast enough to outrun him on my own. So you want me to be your damn decoy? Bakugo snarled. No, Izuku shot back, his eyes blazing with a newfound confidence. I need you to be my rocket. When I give the signal, you're going to hit me with one of your biggest explosions. Not to hurt me, but to launch me. Bakugo stared at him, his mind processing the sheer, suicidal insanity of the plan. He was being asked to trust Deku's durability and to use his own power not for destruction, but for support. It was a plan that went against every fiber of his being. And it was their only shot. Fine, Bakugo growled. But if you mess this up, I'll kill you. The two boys turned to face the approaching All Might, no longer as rivals, but as a single, unified front. So, you've decided to work together, All Might said, a proud smile finally touching his lips. Excellent. Now, show me what you can do. You asked for it, Bakugo roared. He unleashed a torrent of explosions, not at All Might, but at the surrounding buildings, creating a massive cloud of smoke and debris. It was a smokescreen, a chaotic diversion. All Might's senses were overwhelmed for a moment. In that instant, Izuku, in his full cowling state, shot past him, a green blur heading for the exit gate. Clever. All Might boomed, easily batting Bakugo aside and turning to pursue Izuku. But Bakugo was relentless. He was on his feet in an instant, launching himself at All Might's back, clinging to him like a rabid dog. Your fight is with me. He screamed, unleashing a series of point-blank explosions against the hero's back. They did no damage, but they were an undeniable annoyance. You have spirit, young Bakugo. All Might said, trying to peel him off. But you're just delaying the inevitable. He finally ripped Bakugo off and threw him to the side. But the delay had been just enough. Izuku was halfway to the gate. It's now or never, Kachan. Izuku's voice yelled from down the street. Bakugo, bruised and panting, looked at the approaching All Might, then at the distant form of Izuku. He made his choice. He aimed his gauntlet, not at the hero, but at his partner. Go to hell, Deku, he roared, and unleashed a massive, concentrated blast. The explosion wasn't an attack. It was a booster rocket. The shockwave hit Izuku, launching him forward at an incredible, uncontrollable speed. He flew through the air, a battered green projectile, and tumbled past the exit gate just as the final buzzer sounded. All Might stood in the middle of the street, watching. He had been outplayed. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was lying just past the gate, unconscious but safe. Bakugo was in a crater, his arm smoking, a look of grim, exhausted satisfaction on his face. They had passed. They had worked together. And in the fires of their final exam, a new, fragile, and deeply dysfunctional partnership had been forged. In the observation room, the students watched the monitors, a newfound respect for Bakugo and Izuku in their eyes. They had faced an impossible opponent and, through a combination of brute force and insane strategy, had won. They passed, Kirishima said, a wide, toothy grin on his face. So manly. Indeed, Yaoyorozu agreed. Their ability to overcome their personal differences and formulate a successful strategy under extreme pressure was highly impressive. All right, quiet down, Aizawa's voice cut in. The final exam is about to begin. The main screen shifted, displaying a new environment. It was a massive, complex industrial zone, a labyrinth of pipes, scaffolding, cranes, and half-finished structures. It looked less like a testing ground and more like a death trap. And now, for our final contestant, a cheerful, high-pitched voice said over the speakers. It was Principal Nezu. Let's see how our top student handles a battle of wits, shall we? On the screen, Naruto walked into the industrial zone, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm as he surveyed the chaotic landscape. The rules are the same, young Uzumaki. Nezu's voice chirped. Capture me, or escape through the designated gate within 30 minutes. Your exam starts. Now. The moment the timer began, a deafening roar echoed through the zone. A gigantic wrecking ball, attached to a massive crane, swung down, obliterating the section of scaffolding Naruto had been standing on a second before. Naruto had already vanished, reappearing on a different structure 100 meters away. A direct approach, Principal? Naruto said to the empty air, a grin on his face. Not at all. Nezu's voice replied, coming from speakers all around the zone. That was simply a calculation. Based on your psychological profile, your tendency to assess a battlefield from a high vantage point, there was a 92.7% probability you would be standing on that exact spot. The opening move is mine. In the observation room, the student stared. He's fighting a crane? Kaminari asked, confused. No, Yaoyorozu corrected, her eyes wide with understanding. He's fighting the entire environment. Principal Nezu is using his high-spec quirk to predict Uzumaki's movements and turn the entire zone into a weapon. Another crane arm swung a massive I-beam, forcing Naruto to teleport again. He appeared on the ground, only for the earth beneath him to give way as Nezu remotely triggered a demolition charge, creating a massive pit. Your teleportation is impressive, young Uzumaki, Nezu's voice continued, cheerful and analytical. But it is a reaction. You are reacting to my moves. As long as I can predict where you will go, I can stay one step ahead. It is a simple matter of probability. Naruto landed silently at the bottom of the pit, looking up. He was being herded, his movements controlled and anticipated. Nezu was playing chess, and he was the king. You think so? Naruto said, a glint in his eye. He made a hand sign. Haju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In 100 puffs of smoke, the entire pit was filled with identical Narutos. They scrambled out, scattering in every direction. An interesting move. Nezu commented. You've overwhelmed the board with pawns. But which one is the king? The cranes and demolition equipment went into overdrive, swinging, smashing, and destroying the clones with brutal efficiency. But the clones weren't attacking. They were running, mapping, and relaying information. While the chaos raged, the original Naruto had vanished. He wasn't running from the destruction. He was moving toward its source. He moved through the shadows, a ghost in the machine, his destination the central control tower where Nezu was orchestrating his symphony of destruction. He reached the base of the tower. It was a fortress of reinforced steel, with no obvious way in. Did you really think I would leave my front door open? Nezu's voice asked, a hint of smugness in his tone. Didn't need you to, Naruto replied. He placed a hand on the solid steel wall. He didn't punch it. He didn't try to break it. He simply phased his hand through the metal, a technique he had learned from a man who was once his greatest rival. He then flowed the rest of his body through the wall, appearing inside the tower's ground floor. He moved up through the tower, bypassing the security systems, phasing through walls and floors. He was no longer playing Nezu's game. He had created his own board. In the control room, Nezu watched the monitors, a gleeful smile on his face as his cranes took out the last of the clones. Checkmate, he declared to the empty room. It seems my predictions were correct. Young Uzumaki is out of time. Not quite. Nezu froze. The voice had come from right behind him. He spun his chair around to see Naruto standing there, leaning against the far wall, a cup of tea he'd found in the staff kitchen in his hand. He wasn't holding capture tape. He hadn't even approached the principal. How? How did you get in here? Nezu stammered, his super genius brain unable to compute this impossibility. My sensors, my security. Nothing was triggered. Your game was about destroying the path to the king, Naruto said, taking a calm sip of his tea. You were so focused on the board, you forgot the king could just walk off it. He smiled. Checkmate. Nezu stared at the boy, at the impossible, reality-defying student who had not just beaten his strategy, but had rendered it completely irrelevant. He slumped back in his chair and then, a slow, delighted chuckle escaped his lips. Magnificent, he whispered. Absolutely magnificent. He pressed a button. The final exam is over, he announced. Team Uzumaki. Passes. The observation room was silent as the word passes echoed from the speakers. The students of Class 1A stared at the screen, which showed Naruto calmly sipping his tea while the super genius principal of their school looked on in delighted defeat. Kaminari just shook his head. I don't get it. He didn't even fight. He didn't have to, Yaoyorozu said, her voice filled with a profound, almost fearful respect. He understood the true nature of the test. It wasn't about power. It was about strategy. He didn't just win the game, he proved the game itself was pointless. With the final exam concluded, Aizawa gathered the exhausted, battered, and mentally drained students of Class 1A back in their classroom. First off, he began, his voice a low grumble. No one failed the final exams. A wave of relief washed over the students who had technically failed their combat portions. However, Aizawa continued, his eyes glowing with a faint red light, 5 of you failed the practical portion. Ashido, Kaminari, Kirishima, Sato, and Sero. As such, you will all be attending supplementary lessons during the break. He then offered a rare, terrifying grin. And it's going to be hell. The 5 students slumped in their seats, their relief instantly evaporating. But for the rest of you, Aizawa announced, the school has a reward for all your hard work this semester. We're holding a summer training camp in the woods. The mood in the room instantly shifted to one of pure, unadulterated excitement. A training camp. It was a classic school event, a chance to get stronger and bond as a class. We'll be pushing your quirks to their absolute limits, Aizawa said, a glint in his eye. It won't be a vacation. Prepare yourselves. Later that evening, Naruto was in his room, packing a small bag for the trip, when his phone buzzed. The caller ID was a simple, stylized rabbit icon. He answered. So, Mirko's voice, a low, playful purr, came through the speaker. I heard you passed your final exam by having a tea party with a rat. It was very civilized, Naruto replied, a smile in his voice. He's a surprisingly good conversationalist. I bet, she chuckled. Listen, I'm heading out of town for a few days on a mission. Some real work, not the pussyfooting around you kids do in school. Be safe, he said, his tone softening slightly. Always am, she shot back, her voice full of confidence. But when I get back, you and me, we're getting that dessert. And this time, no supervillain interruptions. Got it, pretty boy? It's a date, he confirmed. Good, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. Don't get soft while I'm gone, sensei. And then she hung up. Naruto placed his phone down, a genuine, warm smile on his face. He finished packing his bag, a feeling of simple, uncomplicated happiness settling over him. A training camp with his friends. A date to look forward to. For the first time in this new life, things felt normal. In a dark, grimy bar in a forgotten part of the city, Tomura Shigaraki scratched his neck, his eyes glued to a television screen showing a news report about UA's upcoming summer training camp. The symbol of peace's little successor. And the boy who broke my Nomu. He rasped, his voice a childish, hateful whine. They're all going to be there. All the little hero eggs in one basket. A voice from a monitor in the corner of the room, distorted and filled with a cold, ancient authority, spoke. Patience, Tomura. The pieces are in place. The Vanguard Action Squad is ready. A wide, unhinged grin spread across Shigaraki's face. I know, sensei, he said, his scratching becoming more frantic. It's time for the next level. It's time to show them that their safe little world is just a game that's about to end. Before leaving for the training camp, Naruto decided to make one last stop. He hadn't seen his parents in person since the sports festival, and he knew they would be worried. He took a local train to their quiet suburban neighborhood, the trip a peaceful contrast to the high-stakes world he now inhabited. The moment he opened the front door, he was enveloped in a bone-crushing hug. My boy. My champion. His father, Arashi, roared, lifting him off the ground. We saw the whole thing. You were magnificent. His mother, Yashima, was right behind him, her eyes wet with tears of pride and relief. Oh, Naruto. We were so proud, and then so worried when we heard about the villains in Hasu. Are you all right? Are you hurt? I'm fine, Mom, Naruto said, his voice muffled by his father's hug. Everything's okay. They finally let him go, ushering him into the living room, which was decorated with newspaper clippings of his victory and a large, framed photo of him on the winner's podium. They fussed over him, plying him with his favorite snacks and asking a million questions about his classes, his friends, and his teachers. He answered them patiently, the familiar warmth of his family home a comforting balm after the intensity of the past few weeks. After he had recounted a heavily censored version of the Hasu incident, his mother sat down opposite him, a serious look on her face. She slid a magazine across the coffee table. The cover featured the now famous photo of him and Mirko, laughing outside the restaurant, under the headline, Power Couple. UA's Phantom Rookie and the Rabbit Hero, more than just mentor and intern? So, Yashima began, her voice a carefully neutral tone that all sons recognize as the precursor to a serious interrogation. Your father and I were just curious. You seemed very friendly with the number 5 hero. Arashi leaned forward, a wide, conspiratorial grin on his face. Son, is there something you want to tell us? She's a bit older, but she's a real firecracker. Your mother and I approve. Naruto felt a flush of heat creep up his neck, a rare moment of genuine teenage awkwardness. He had faced down supervillains and gods, but navigating his parents' questions about his love life was a different kind of battlefield entirely. She was my mentor for the internship, that's all, Naruto said, trying for a casual tone. We were just having a celebratory dinner after a successful mission. A celebratory dinner at the most romantic restaurant in the city? His mother pressed, raising an eyebrow. The one you need to book 6 months in advance? I have my ways, Naruto said with a vague, cheeky grin. And the wink to the camera? Arashi added, waggling his eyebrows. When you said she was hot. That was smooth, son. Very smooth. Naruto just sighed, a long-suffering sound. We're just friends. His parents exchanged a look, a silent, parental communication that clearly said, he's not telling us everything, but we'll let it go for now. All right, sweetie, Yashima said, her tone softening. Just be careful. This new world you're in. It's a lot bigger and more dangerous than we ever imagined. I will, he promised. Always. He stayed for a few more hours, soaking in the simple, uncomplicated love of his family. As he left, his mother hugged him tightly at the door. Be good, she whispered. And try not to cause too much trouble at your camp. She pulled back slightly, a mischievous glint in her eye. And with that hero, Mirko. Remember to use protection. Naruto's face instantly erupted in a furious blush, his usual cool demeanor shattering into a million pieces. Mom, he stammered, completely flustered. We're not. It's just. We're just friends. Yashima and Arashi just laughed, thoroughly enjoying their son's rare moment of embarrassment. No promises, he finally managed to say with a grin, his blush still visible as he walked away from the quiet suburban house. His heart was full. He had a family who loved him, friends who counted on him, and a date with a beautiful, terrifying rabbit hero to look forward to. For the first time since coming to this world, he felt truly, completely at home. And now, it was time for camp. The bus ride to the training camp was filled with the boisterous, excited energy of teenagers on the verge of a summer adventure. They sang, they joked, and they speculated wildly about the kind of training Aizawa had in store for them. I bet we'll be doing intense survival training, Kirishima declared. So manly. Or perhaps advanced rescue simulations in a controlled environment, Ida suggested, chopping the air. Naruto, sitting in the back with Izuku, just smiled and looked out the window. He knew Aizawa. He knew the man's penchant for logical ruses. This trip was not going to be a simple bus ride to a campsite. An hour later, the bus pulled over at a remote, scenic cliffside rest stop. All right, everyone out, Aizawa said, his voice a low grumble. Time for a stretch. As Class 1A disembarked, they were greeted by 2 women in brightly colored, cat-themed hero costumes. Welcome, UA students. The one in red, Mandalay, said with a cheerful wave. We're the pro-hero team, the wild pussycats. The one in blue, Pixie Bob, announced, striking a dramatic pose. And we'll be your instructors for this camp. Before the students could get too excited, Pixie Bob's cheerful expression turned into a wide, predatory grin. She slammed her hands on the ground, and the earth beneath them began to tremble. A massive wave of dirt and rock rose up, pushing the entire class off the cliff and into the sprawling forest below. They landed in a heap, cushioned by the soft forest floor. What was that for? Uraka cried out. Your training camp has already begun, Mandalay's voice, amplified by her telepathy quirk, echoed in their minds. The facility is at the base of that mountain. You have 3 hours to get there on foot. And, she added, her voice gaining a mischievous edge, you'd better hurry. The beasts' forest is full of. Well, beasts. As if on cue, the ground in front of them began to churn. Massive creatures made of dirt, rock, and wood erupted from the forest floor, their forms monstrous and intimidating. The students scrambled into defensive positions, their fun summer trip instantly turning into a desperate fight for survival. Everyone, stick together, Ida commanded, taking charge. Form a defensive perimeter. The class responded, their training kicking in. Todoroki created walls of ice, Bakugo blasted the larger beasts, and Kirishima and Kaminari formed a frontline assault. They were working together, a chaotic but surprisingly effective unit. Naruto, however, was not fighting. He was standing on a high branch, his arms crossed, a calm, analytical expression on his face. He watched his classmates fight, his eyes tracking their movements, their teamwork, their weaknesses. Naruto. A little help here? Kaminari yelled as he was nearly flattened by a giant dirt golem. Naruto didn't move. Instead, he made a single hand sign. A dozen shadow clones appeared throughout the battlefield, but they didn't attack the beasts. They appeared next to his struggling classmates. Yaoyorozu. One clone yelled as she was about to be overwhelmed. Your cannon is powerful, but your reload time is too slow. Create smaller, faster projectiles. Harass them, don't try to obliterate them. Todoroki. Another clone shouted. Your ice walls are strong, but they're static. You're blocking your own team's line of sight. Create pillars, not walls. Control the battlefield, don't just divide it. Bakugo. A third clone appeared next to the explosive teen. Stop aiming for the center mass. These things don't have organs. Target the joints. The legs, the arms. Dismantle them, don't just blast them. One by one, the clones acted as battlefield commanders, offering precise, brutally effective tactical advice. They weren't fighting the battle for them, they were teaching them how to win it themselves. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The students' attacks became more focused, more efficient. They started working together not just as a group, but as a coordinated team. They were no longer just surviving. They were dominating. From the cliffside above, Aizawa and the Pussycats watched on a monitor. Well, I'll be, Pixie Bob said, a surprised look on her face. They're tearing through my beasts like they're nothing. Aizawa just grunted, a rare, almost imperceptible smile hidden in his capture weapon. He was watching Naruto's clones direct the flow of battle. He's not just a fighter, Aizawa thought. He's a leader. He's not just making himself stronger, he's making everyone around him stronger. The grueling trek through the forest took hours, but Class 1A finally emerged, battered, bruised, exhausted, but victorious. They had not just passed the first test. They had aced it. And they had done it as a team, forged in the fires of the Beast's forest, under the quiet, watchful command of their own resident shinobi. By the time Class 1A stumbled out of the Beast's forest, the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. They were a mess of dirt, sweat, and exhaustion, but they were also a cohesive unit. The chaotic brawl for survival had forged them into a team in a way no structured exercise ever could. You're late, Pixie Bob said, a wide, predatory grin on her face as they collapsed onto the grass in front of a large, rustic lodge. We expected you here hours ago. They did better than I thought they would, Mandalay commented, offering them a kind smile. Especially considering they were fighting with a handicap. Handicap? Kirishima asked, panting. What handicap? Uzumaki didn't lift a finger to help you, Aizawa stated, emerging from the lodge. He used his clones as instructors, not as weapons. You passed this test on your own merit. Be proud of that. The class looked over at Naruto, who was stretching as if he'd just woken from a nap. A new level of respect dawned on them. He hadn't just shown them his power, he had shown them their own. After a quick, and much needed, trip to the hot springs and a massive dinner, the students gathered in the main hall of the lodge. It was here they were introduced to the final member of the Pussycats group, a small boy with a red hat that had two golden horns sticking out of it. This is my nephew, Kota, Mandalay said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. He'll be staying with us for the duration of the camp. Say hello, Kota. The boy just glared at them, his expression one of pure, unadulterated contempt. I don't want to hang out with a bunch of hero wannabes, he muttered. Before anyone could react, Izuku walked forward, a friendly smile on his face. Hey there, I'm Midoriya. It's nice to meet. Wham! Kota's fist shot out, delivering a swift, powerful punch directly to Izuku's groin. Izuku collapsed with a pained squeak, clutching himself. Midoriya, Ida yelled, rushing to his side. Leave him be, Naruto said, his voice calm. He walked over and looked down at the scowling boy. That was a cheap shot. Kota glared up at him, unafraid. I hate people like you. Calling yourselves heroes and showing off your stupid quirks. It's pathetic. Naruto didn't get angry. He just knelt down, his gaze softening slightly. He recognized the look in the boy's eyes. It was the same lonely, defiant anger he had seen in the mirror for most of his childhood. Someone hurt you, Naruto said, not as a question, but as a statement. Someone who was supposed to be a hero. The boy's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise and pain, before his glare returned. He turned and stormed off without another word. I apologize for him, Mandalay said with a sigh. His parents were pro-heroes. They died in the line of duty a few years ago. He hasn't been the same since. The mood in the room sobered. They all understood. To Kota, the word hero wasn't a symbol of hope, it was a reminder of loss. All right, that's enough for today, Aizawa announced, breaking the heavy silence. Get some rest. Because starting tomorrow morning, your real training begins. We're going to push your quirks until you scream. It's going to be hell. As the students headed to their rooms, Naruto's gaze drifted to the dark forest outside. He could still feel the echo of Kota's pain. It was a familiar darkness. And as he looked out into the trees, he felt another, colder darkness watching them, a silent, patient threat waiting for its moment to strike. The camp had just begun, but the real test was still to come. The next morning, Aizawa's promise of hell began to take shape. The students of Class 1A stood in a large clearing, each facing a unique and torturous training regimen designed by the Pussycats to push their quirks to the breaking point and beyond. The goal of this camp is to strengthen your quirks and cover your weaknesses. Aizawa announced, his voice a flat, merciless drone. We will be pushing you past your limits. We are aiming for plus ultra. It was a nightmare tailor-made for each of them. Bakugo was forced to plunge his hands into boiling water to expand his sweat glands, then unleash continuous, massive explosions to increase the scale of his attacks until his arms screamed in protest. Todoroki was submerged in a barrel of water, forced to alternate between rapidly freezing and boiling it, a brutal exercise to regulate his body temperature and force him to use both halves of his quirk in tandem. Uraka was strapped into a machine that spun her around while she made heavy objects float, a torturous method to increase her weight limit and fight her quirk's nauseating drawback. Izuku, under the watchful eye of a disguised All Might, was engaged in his own personal struggle. He was practicing his full cowling, trying to maintain the state, to make the power flow through him like a gentle stream rather than a destructive flood. Naruto, however, was given no specific task. Aizawa had simply looked at him and said, "Your training is your own. Don't destroy the mountain." So, while his classmates were screaming in exertion, Naruto found a quiet, secluded spot deep in the woods. He created 100 shadow clones. 50 were tasked with advanced chakra control exercises, leaf balancing, tree walking, and water walking, all performed simultaneously to refine his already perfect control. The other 50 engaged in a massive, silent taijutsu battle royale, a chaotic dance of skill and precision to keep his combat senses honed. The original Naruto, however, was not training his body. He was training his senses. He sat in a meditative state, expanding his sensory abilities, feeling the life force of the forest, the energy of his struggling classmates, and the faint, cold echo of the darkness he had sensed the night before. It was still there, a discordant note in the symphony of the forest. His meditation was interrupted by the feeling of a small, angry presence nearby. He followed it, moving silently through the trees, until he came to a small, hidden clearing on the edge of a cliff. There, sitting on a rocky outcrop, was Kota, staring out at the mountains. It was his secret base. Naruto didn't try to sneak up on him. He made his approach known, stepping on a dry twig. Kota spun around, his expression instantly hostile. "What do you want?" The boy snarled. "Come to lecture me?" "No," Naruto said calmly, walking to the edge of the cliff, giving the boy plenty of space. "It's a nice view." Kota just glared at him, saying nothing. "My parents died when I was born," Naruto said, his voice quiet, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I never knew them. I grew up alone. Everyone in my village. They looked at me like I was a monster. Something to be hated and feared." Kota's glare softened for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of surprise. "I was angry for a long time," Naruto continued. "I hated the world. I hated everyone who had what I didn't. But then I found people who believed in me. A teacher. Friends. They taught me that being a hero isn't about having a cool power or being famous. It's about having the strength to protect the people you care about. Your parents. They died protecting someone. That doesn't make them failures. It makes them heroes." He finally turned to look at the boy. "It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. But don't let that hate poison you. It's a heavy burden to carry alone." He didn't offer any more advice. He just stood there for a moment, sharing the silence, before turning to leave. "If you ever need to talk," he said over his shoulder, "I'm a good listener." He walked back into the woods, leaving a stunned, silent Kota alone with his thoughts. The seeds of understanding had been planted. As night fell, the exhausted students of Class 1A gathered for dinner, their bodies aching but their spirits strangely high. They were stronger than they had been that morning. But as Naruto sat with them, a clone he had left on the perimeter of the forest suddenly dissipated, its final, fleeting memory flooding his mind, the image of a swirling, dark purple mist, and the glint of a dozen pairs of malicious eyes, watching them from the shadows. The darkness was no longer just a feeling. It was here. The cheerful chatter in the dining hall died instantly. Naruto had stood up so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor. Every eye in the room turned to him. His usual calm, almost lazy demeanor was gone, replaced by the chilling, focused intensity of a soldier on the front lines. He didn't look at his classmates. His gaze was locked on Aizawa, who was sitting with the other pussycats. "They're here," Naruto said, his voice low but carrying with absolute clarity. "In the forest. Now." Aizawa didn't question him. He didn't ask how he knew. He had learned to trust the boy's impossible instincts. He was on his feet in an instant. Mandalay. He was cut off by a deafening roar from outside. A wave of brilliant, searingly hot blue fire erupted from the tree line, engulfing a section of the forest in a terrifying inferno. The heat washed over the lodge, and screams of panic erupted from the students. "It's the League of Villains." Mandalay's telepathic voice cut through the chaos, a desperate warning in every student's mind. "We are under attack. Students, do not engage. Retreat to the safety of the lodge. Aizawa, go. Class A, you have permission to engage in combat," Aizawa yelled, his capture weapon already flying as he ran for the door. "Protect yourselves. Protect each other." While most of the students were frozen in a state of shock and fear, Naruto was already moving, his mind a whirlwind of tactical calculations. He made a single hand sign. 50 shadow clones appeared, flooding the room. "Listen up." His voice, amplified by his clones, commanded absolute attention. "This is a coordinated attack. They're trying to separate us and pick us off. We will not let that happen." The clones began issuing orders with battlefield precision. "Todoroki. An ice wall. Now. Protect the lodge from the fire. Yaoyorozu. Create gas masks for everyone. There's a poison gas user in the woods. Ida. Gather the students from Class B. Get everyone who can't fight inside the main building." His classmates, startled out of their fear by his decisive command, scrambled to follow his orders. Todoroki was already at the door, a massive wall of ice erupting to meet the encroaching flames. The original Naruto turned to a small, specific group. "Bakugo. Kirishima. You're with me. We're going on the offensive. We're hunting." Finally, Bakugo roared, a wild, predatory grin on his face. "Some real action." "You can count on me," Kirishima said, hardening his arms. "Midoriya," Naruto said, his tone softening for a moment as he looked at his friend. "Your fight is not here. Kota is missing. He's at his secret base on the cliff. One of them is heading for him. A big one. Your job is to find him and protect him. No matter what." Izuku's eyes widened with understanding and a new, steely resolve. He nodded once, a silent promise, and then he was gone, a green blur heading for the back of the lodge. With the defenses set and his teams assigned, Naruto turned toward the burning forest. He could feel them out there. A collection of powerful, twisted energies. The Vanguard Action Squad. "Let's go," he said to Bakugo and Kirishima. The three of them ran out of the lodge, past Todoroki's massive ice wall, and plunged directly into the fiery, smoke-filled chaos of the beast's forest. The hunt had begun. The burning forest was a chaotic hellscape of smoke, shadow, and the searing blue heat of an unknown villain's fire. For Bakugo and Kirishima, it was disorienting. For Naruto, it was just another battlefield. "Stay close," Naruto commanded, his voice cutting through the roar of the flames. "Their goal is to separate us. Don't let them." He moved with a silent, purposeful grace, his senses expanded, filtering through the chaos. He could feel the panicked energy of his classmates, the grim determination of Aizawa fighting in the distance, and the twisted, malicious signatures of the villains scattered throughout the woods. "There," Naruto said, pointing into a particularly dark, dense thicket of trees that was untouched by the blue flames. "One of them. He's waiting for us." "Then let's not keep him waiting," Bakugo roared, blasting ahead with a series of explosions, ignoring Naruto's command to stay close. "I'll take this bastard myself." "Bakugo, wait. It's a trap," Kirishima yelled, hardening his arms and running after him. Naruto sighed. So much for teamwork. He followed, a silent shadow trailing behind his reckless teammates. Bakugo burst into the clearing, his eyes scanning for a target. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant crackle of fire. "Come on out, you coward. I'm gonna blast you too." He was cut off by a sound like grinding teeth and a flash of silver. A dozen razor-sharp blades, formed from elongated teeth, erupted from the trees, aiming to impale him. "Look out," Kirishima yelled, tackling Bakugo to the ground. The blades shot over their heads, embedding themselves deep in a massive tree trunk. A figure slowly emerged from the shadows, a man in a black, full-body straitjacket, his mouth a grotesque, stretched-out horror of sharpened, extendable teeth. It was the death row inmate, Moonfish. "Flesh." The villain hissed, his voice a distorted, metallic rasp. "I want to see your flesh." More blades shot out from his mouth, a whirlwind of steel that shredded the surrounding trees. Kirishima stood his ground, his hardened body taking the brunt of the assault, sparks flying as the blades scraped against his unbreakable form. He's tough. Kirishima grunted, struggling to hold his ground. But I can't hold him off forever. Then don't. Bakugo screamed, getting to his feet. He began to unleash a barrage of explosions, trying to create an opening, but Moonfish's blades were too fast, too numerous. They formed a perfect, impenetrable dome of offense and defense. Naruto watched from the edge of the clearing, his eyes narrowed, analyzing. The villain was powerful, his quirk versatile. But he was insane, his attacks wild and without focus. And he had a weakness. Bakugo. Naruto's voice cut through the chaos. Stop the wide area blasts. They're useless. AP shot. Aim for the base of his teeth, where they connect to his gums. Don't order me around, you. Bakugo started to snarl, but then Naruto's words registered. He saw the logic. He grit his teeth, focused his power into a single, concentrated point, and fired. The AP shot was a focused, armor-piercing blast. It shot through a gap in the blade's storm and struck the base of one of Moonfish's elongated teeth. The villain let out a pained, gurgling scream as the tooth cracked, the nerve endings likely fried. The blade dome faltered for a fraction of a second. It was the only opening Naruto needed. He had already created a clone behind a nearby tree. As Moonfish recoiled in pain, the clone burst from its hiding spot. It wasn't holding a weapon. It was holding a large, heavy log. With a powerful grunt, the clone swung the log like a baseball bat, slamming it directly into the side of Moonfish's head. The villain crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Silence. Kirishima and Bakugo stared, panting, at the defeated villain. They had been in a desperate fight for their lives, and Naruto had ended it with a log. What? Naruto said, walking into the clearing. It was a solid piece of wood. It worked. Bakugo just stared at him, then at the unconscious villain, then back at him. A strange, unfamiliar look was in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was a grudging, infuriating respect. Before anyone could say anything else, Naruto's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a sudden, genuine alarm. He could feel it now. A massive, flaring power signature from the direction of the cliff. It was Izuku. And he was in a fight he couldn't win. We have to go, Naruto said, his voice grim. Now. Izuku's in trouble. There was no time for questions. Naruto didn't offer an explanation, and Bakugo, for once, didn't demand one. The sheer, undiluted alarm in Naruto's eyes was enough. He was a boy who had remained calm while fighting armies and dismantling villains. For him to look genuinely worried meant the situation was dire. Which way? Bakugo barked, his explosions already propelling him forward. Follow me, Naruto commanded, and the three of them shot through the burning forest, a desperate rescue team moving as one. They arrived at the cliffside to a scene of brutal, one-sided destruction. The villain was a mountain of muscle, a man named Muscular, his body grotesquely augmented by thick, writhing fibers of his own tissue. He stood over the small, terrified form of Kota, a sadistic grin on his face. And between them, a battered, bloodied, and defiant Izuku Midoriya stood as a lone, green lightning-wreathed shield. You're a persistent one, aren't you? Muscular chuckled, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. I've already broken both your arms. Just stay down. Izuku's arms were a mangled, purple mess, hanging uselessly at his sides. But he was still standing, his legs trembling, his body alight with the power of full cowling. I will not, he gasped, his voice tight with pain. I will not let you touch him. He had tried. He had used his 5% full cowling, but it was like hitting a brick wall. Muscular's quirk was too powerful, his defense too absolute. Every punch Izuku threw was met with an overwhelming counter that had shattered his bones. Such a shame, Muscular said with a sigh. I guess I'll just have to kill you both. He lunged, his muscle fibers coiling into a massive, battering ram of a fist. Time seemed to slow down for Izuku. He saw the attack coming. He knew he couldn't block it. He knew he couldn't dodge it. He thought of All Might entrusting him with his power. He thought of Naruto's endless, patient training. He thought of the small, terrified boy behind him who had lost all faith in heroes. No, Izuku thought, a fire igniting in his soul that burned brighter than any blue flame. Not today. He focused. He didn't just draw on the 5% of one for all he could safely control. He reached deeper, past the pain, past the fear, and grabbed the raging, infinite storm of power with both hands. He poured all of it, every last drop of his will, his hope, and his fury, into his already shattered right arm. "You want to see a real quirk?" he screamed, his voice a raw, primal roar. He cocked his fist back, the limb glowing with a blinding, incandescent light. One for all. 1,000,000%. Delaware. Detroit. Smash. The resulting impact was not a punch. It was an apocalypse. A shockwave of pure, concussive force erupted from his fist, a physical thing that tore the cliffside apart. The ground shattered. Trees were uprooted. The very air seemed to scream. Muscular's overwhelming offense was met by an even greater, more absolute power. His muscle fibers were shredded, his defense obliterated, and he was launched backward like a cannonball, slamming into the side of the mountain with enough force to create a massive crater. Silence. The dust began to settle. Izuku stood in the center of the wreckage, his right arm a mangled, unrecognizable ruin of flesh and bone, completely destroyed from the recoil. But he was standing. And behind him, Kota was safe. It was at that moment that Naruto, Bakugo, and Kirishima arrived at the edge of the clearing. They skidded to a halt, their eyes wide as they took in the scene, the massive crater, the defeated villain, and the small, broken boy who had stood his ground and won an impossible fight. Bakugo stared, his mind completely unable to process what he was seeing. The power. The sheer, world-breaking power. It was the same power he had seen at the final exam. It was the power of All Might. And Deku, the useless, quirkless Deku, was wielding it. Naruto looked at his friend, at the shattered arm and the unwavering spirit. A slow, proud, and deeply pained smile touched his lips. The boy was a hero. There was no longer any doubt. The silence on the shattered cliffside was heavy, broken only by Izuku's ragged, painful breaths. He swayed on his feet for a moment longer before his body finally gave out, and he began to fall. Before he could hit the ground, Naruto was there, a silent flash of movement, catching his broken friend and gently lowering him to the ground. Kirishima rushed forward, his hardened skin a stark contrast to his worried expression. "Midoriya. Is he?" "He's alive," Naruto said, his voice a low, grim murmur. He quickly assessed Izuku's injuries. The arms were a complete write-off, a mangled ruin of shattered bone and torn muscle. He was suffering from severe exhaustion and shock. But he needs a real medic, now. Bakugo remained frozen at the edge of the clearing, his eyes locked on Izuku's unconscious form. His mind was a maelstrom of conflicting images, the quirkless, crying Deku from their childhood, the determined boy on the beach, the strategist who had beaten him in the combat trials, and now, this monster of self-sacrificing power who wielded the strength of a god. The pieces were all there, forming a picture he didn't want to see, a truth that threatened to unravel his entire world. A small, choked sob cut through the tension. Kota, who had been frozen in terror, was now staring at Izuku, tears streaming down his face. He had just watched a boy destroy his own body to save him, a selfless act so pure and absolute it shattered the cynical wall he had built around his heart. He saw his parents in that sacrifice. He saw a hero. Naruto stood up, his expression hardening as he looked back toward the burning forest. "The fight's not over. Kirishima, stay here. Guard them." "Bakugo," he said, his voice sharp, "snap out of it. We're not done yet." Bakugo's head snapped up, his eyes finally focusing, the internal chaos momentarily replaced by the familiar fire of battle. "What's the plan?" he growled. "The villain's objective is you," Naruto stated simply. "Me?" Bakugo asked, confused. "Think about the sports festival," Naruto explained, his voice low and serious. "You made it to the finals with overwhelming, destructive power. You were the one who had to be restrained on the podium, a symbol of uncontrollable rage. To a guy like Shigaraki, that doesn't look like a hero. It looks like potential. They're not here to kill students. They're here to recruit. They're here to kidnap you." The realization hit Bakugo like a physical blow. He wasn't just a combatant, he was the prize. "Mandalay's telepathy isn't working," Naruto continued, his mind processing the reports from his scattered clones. "That means Aizawa-sensei is fighting someone who can block it. He's isolated." He made a hand sign. A single clone appeared. "Get Midoriya and the kid back to the lodge. Now. Be careful." The clone nodded, carefully lifting Izuku's broken body and gesturing for Kota to follow. "So what do we do?" Kirishima asked, his fists hardened. "We can't just leave everyone else to fight." "We're not," Naruto said, his eyes glowing with a faint, dangerous light. "We're going to end this." He looked at Bakugo, a silent challenge passing between them. "They came here to hunt. Let's show them what it feels like to be the prey." "Wait for me," Kirishima yelled, His initial order to stay behind now moot as Naruto's clone disappeared into the trees with Izuku and Kota. "You're not leaving me out of this. I can still fight." Naruto glanced back at him, then at Bakugo, who was already blasting his way through the underbrush. He gave a sharp nod. "Fine. Keep up. And do exactly as I say." The three of them moved as a unit, a spearhead of teenage fury cutting through the burning woods. Naruto was the tip, his senses stretched out, guiding them through the chaos. Bakugo and Kirishima were the shaft, a powerful combination of offense and defense. "They're trying to converge on our position," Naruto said, his voice low and serious as they ran. "But they're being intercepted. My clones are engaging the smaller threats, buying time for the others to retreat to the lodge. So we're just running around while your copies do all the work?" Bakugo snarled, though there was less heat in it than usual. It was more of a complaint than a challenge. "No," Naruto replied, skidding to a halt behind a large rock formation. He held up a hand, silencing them. "We're going for the head. Aizawa-sensei is just ahead. He's fighting one of the leaders." They peered over the rock. In a small clearing, the forest floor blackened and smoking, Aizawa was locked in a desperate battle. He was injured, his movement sluggish, but his eyes were blazing red, fixed on his opponent. The villain was a young man with patchwork purple skin held together by surgical staples, his hands wreathed in the same brilliant, destructive blue fire that had set the forest ablaze. It was Dabi. "You're a persistent one, Pro," Dabi said, his voice a bored, lazy drawl. He unleashed a torrent of blue flame. Aizawa, with a grunt of effort, erased his quirk just as the flames erupted, causing them to sputter and die a few feet from his face. "But you can't keep your eyes open forever," Dabi taunted, a sadistic smile on his face. "He's being worn down," Naruto murmured. "Aizawa's fighting style is perfect for single, powerful opponents, but it's a war of attrition. He can't blink. So what's the plan?" Kirishima asked, his fists hardened. "We just charge in?" "No," Naruto said, his eyes scanning the clearing, analyzing every shadow, every tree. "He's a long-range fighter. A direct assault is what he expects." He looked at his two teammates. "Kirishima, you're the shield. You're going to draw his fire. Bakugo, you're the cannon. You're going to force him to move. I'm the blade. I'm going to end it." He looked Bakugo dead in the eye. "Can you follow orders for 5 minutes without letting your pride get in the way?" Bakugo met his gaze, a storm of emotions in his eyes. He hated being told what to do. But he had seen Naruto's plans work. He had seen the results of his own reckless charges. He grit his teeth. "Just tell me who to blast." A grim, determined smile touched Naruto's lips. "Good. Now." Kirishima let out a mighty roar and charged into the clearing. "Hey, villain," he yelled. "Your fight's with me now." Dabi turned, a look of mild annoyance on his face. Another bug to squash. He unleashed a wave of blue fire. Kirishima crossed his arms in front of his face, his body in its unbreakable form, and tanked the hit, the flames washing over him. He grunted from the sheer heat but held his ground. While Dabi was focused on Kirishima, Bakugo shot into the air from the other side of the clearing. "Stun grenade," he roared, creating a blinding flash. Dabi, his vision momentarily spotted, was forced to leap back, creating a defensive wall of fire. But it was too late. The entire sequence had been a perfectly executed diversion. While all eyes were on the flash and the flames, Naruto had used the chaos to move. He wasn't in the clearing. He was above it. He had used Hiraishin to teleport to a kunai a clone had silently placed in the branches of a tall tree overlooking the fight. He dropped from the tree, a silent, descending shadow. Dabi, his senses still recovering from the flashbang, didn't even know he was there until Naruto landed directly behind him. "Game over," Naruto said quietly. Dabi spun around, his hand already blazing, but Naruto was faster. A single, precise chop to the back of the neck, and the villain's eyes rolled back, his blue flames extinguishing as he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Aizawa stared, his one good eye wide with disbelief. The three students he had worried about most, the reckless one, the angry one, and the mysterious one, had just executed a flawless, coordinated takedown of an A-rank villain and saved his life. "Took you long enough," Aizawa rasped, a hint of a proud smirk on his face before he finally allowed himself to collapse. "Sensei," Kirishima yelled, rushing to Aizawa's side. He and Bakugo stood over their fallen teacher, a grim understanding passing between them. Aizawa had fought to his absolute limit to protect them. Naruto was already there, his fingers pressed to Aizawa's neck, checking his pulse. "He's alive," he confirmed, his voice a low, steady anchor in the chaos. "Just exhausted." He's pushed his quirk too far. He quickly created a clone. Get him back to the lodge. Tell the others what happened. Go. The clone nodded, carefully lifting their teacher and disappearing into the smoke-filled woods. So that's it? We won? Kirishima asked, looking from the unconscious Dabi to the spot where Aizawa had been. No, Naruto said, his gaze sweeping the darkened trees around them. That was just a vanguard. The real show is about to start. As if on cue, a new figure appeared at the edge of the clearing, stepping out from behind a burning tree with the theatrical flair of a stage magician. He was a tall man in a coat and a top hat, his face hidden by a patterned mask. It was Mr. Compress. Bravo, bravo. The man said, clapping his hands together in a slow, mocking applause. A truly stunning performance. To take down one of our strongest with such youthful exuberance. I am thoroughly impressed. Bakugo didn't wait for the monologue. He launched himself forward, his hands already blazing. I've had enough of you damn villains, he roared. Ah, Mr. Compress chided, deftly sidestepping the explosive charge. Patience is a virtue, young man. And you are my final act. He moved with a fluid, deceptive grace. He wasn't a fighter like Dabi, he was an escape artist, a master of misdirection. Kirishima charged, trying to pin him down, but the villain was like smoke, always just out of reach. His quirk isn't for combat, Naruto analyzed, his eyes tracking the villain's every move. It's for capture. He's trying to touch you. Don't let him get close. Too late for that. Mr. Compress declared. He feinted towards Kirishima, drawing Bakugo's attention, then spun, his hand shooting out towards Bakugo's face. But a yellow flash intercepted him. Naruto appeared between them, catching the villain's wrist just before it could make contact. I don't think so, Naruto said, his grip like iron. My, such speed. Mr. Compress said, not a hint of panic in his voice. But a magician always has a trick up his sleeve. With his free hand, he reached into his coat and threw a handful of small, blue marbles onto the ground. They clattered on the scorched earth. Tell me, hero, he asked, his masked face tilting. Can you watch my hands? And your friends? At the same time? The marbles suddenly expanded, revealing their contents. It was Todoroki and Tokoyami, both unconscious, compressed by his quirk. Kirishima and Bakugo froze, their eyes wide with shock. The villain had already taken down two of their strongest classmates. It was the perfect distraction. While all eyes were on the released students, Mr. Compress's body seemed to shimmer and dissolve. It was an illusion, a clone made of light from another villain's quirk. The real Mr. Compress was already behind Bakugo. And for my grand finale, the real villain's voice whispered from behind him, I shall make the star of the show. Disappear. Before Bakugo could even turn, Mr. Compress's hand clamped over his mouth. There was a faint shimmer of light, a soft pop, and Katsuki Bakugo was gone. In the villain's hand lay a single, small, blue marble. Bakugo! Kirishima screamed. Mr. Compress gave a theatrical bow. The show is over. Thank you for coming. He turned to leave, but Naruto was already there, his face a mask of cold, silent fury. You're not going anywhere, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. Oh, I do believe I am, Mr. Compress replied. From the darkness, the swirling purple mist of Kurogiri began to form, a gateway to their escape. My ride is here. He tossed the marble containing Bakugo into the air, a final, taunting gesture, and stepped back into the swirling vortex. The portal began to close. But Naruto was faster than a closing door. He vanished in a yellow flash, reappearing for a fraction of a second inside the swirling portal itself. He snatched the blue marble out of the air, then teleported back to his original spot just as the portal snapped shut, leaving a stunned Mr. Compress on the other side. Naruto stood there, the blue marble held between his thumb and forefinger. He looked at the spot where the portal had been, his expression unreadable. The show is over, Naruto said to the empty air. You forgot your star. He crushed the marble in his hand. With a flash of light, an enraged and utterly confused Katsuki Bakugo appeared, falling to his knees. The training camp was a disaster. But the villains had failed. Katsuki Bakugo fell to his knees on the scorched earth, the world a confusing, jarring blur. One moment he was being consumed by darkness, the next he was back in the burning forest, the taste of ozone and failure in his mouth. He looked at his hands, then at Naruto, who was standing over him, his expression unreadable. He had been captured. He had been turned into a helpless prize. And he had been saved. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. Bakugo. You're okay, Kirishima yelled, rushing over. His relief was quickly replaced by concern as he looked at the unconscious forms of Todoroki and Tokoyami. We have to get them back to the lodge. I'm fine, Bakugo growled, shoving Kirishima's helping hand away as he staggered to his feet. He wasn't fine. He was furious, shaken, and for the first time in his life, he felt a profound and terrifying sense of his own weakness. He looked at Naruto, 1,000 angry questions dying on his lips. He had no words, only a burning, impotent rage. Naruto ignored him. His focus was already expanding, his senses sweeping across the entire forest. The immediate threat was gone, but the battle was not over. The main group has retreated, he said, his voice calm and authoritative. But there are still a few stragglers. Kirishima, help me get Todoroki and Tokoyami. We're falling back to the main building. Now. His tone left no room for argument. Even Bakugo, lost in his own internal storm, found himself complying, helping Kirishima lift Todoroki's unconscious form. As they made their way back through the smoldering woods, the full scale of the attack became clear. They passed by other defeated villains, tied up with capture tape or frozen in ice. They saw their classmates, battered and bruised, fighting off the last of the Nomu-like creatures. Naruto's clones were everywhere, acting as a rearguard, protecting the retreating students and coordinating the final pockets of resistance. They arrived back at the lodge to a scene of controlled chaos. The building was a makeshift field hospital, with the students who couldn't fight tending to the wounded. Aizawa was conscious, directing the defense from a stretcher. Izuku was there, his arms in makeshift slings, his face pale but his eyes burning with a fierce light. When they saw Naruto, Kirishima, and a scowling Bakugo walk out of the woods, carrying their fallen comrades, a wave of relief washed over the assembled students. The core of their class was back together. They had survived. In a grimy, hidden bar miles away, the swirling vortex of Kurogiri's portal spat out a single, dejected figure. Mr. Compress stumbled out, his mask askew, his hands empty. Komura Shigaraki, who had been watching the events unfold on a grainy monitor, slowly turned from the screen. He didn't look angry. He looked empty. He began to scratch his neck, the dry, rasping sound filling the silent room. Compress, Shigaraki said, his voice a low, childish whine. Where is he? Where is our grand prize? Mr. Compress flinched. I had him, Shigaraki. He was in my grasp. But the boy. The blonde one. He's not human. He moved through my portal. He took him back. The scratching stopped. Shigaraki slowly walked over to the bar, his movements jerky, unnatural. He picked up a glass, looked at it for a moment, and then his hand closed. The glass disintegrated into a fine gray dust. So, he whispered, his voice trembling with a barely contained, unholy rage. We lost. Again. He turned to face his subordinate, his red eyes glowing with a malevolent light. All because of one. Impossible. Cheating. Hero. The mission had been a catastrophic failure. They hadn't just failed to capture Bakugo, they had been systematically dismantled by a single student. Shigaraki knew, with a chilling certainty, that his master would not be pleased. And Naruto Uzumaki had just moved from a simple obstacle to the absolute top of the League of Villains hit list. The arrival of the police and a full contingent of pro-heroes turned the battered training camp into a major incident scene. The students of Class 1A, exhausted and running on fumes, were quickly ushered into the main lodge and accounted for. The relief of their survival was a heavy, fragile thing, tempered by the grim reality of their injuries and the sheer terror of the attack. Izuku and the other seriously injured students were airlifted to a hospital. Aizawa, despite his own condition, refused to leave until every one of his students was confirmed safe. The camp was officially cancelled, the grand experiment in hero training cut short by a brutal dose of reality. The bus ride back to UA was a somber, silent affair. The boisterous energy of the trip out was gone, replaced by the quiet, introspective mood of soldiers returning from a skirmish. Bakugo stared out the window, his reflection showing a boy lost in a storm of thought, his usual anger replaced by a cold, unsettling quiet. Todoroki sat with his eyes closed, processing not just the fight, but the fact that his classmates had been targeted and captured, however briefly. Naruto sat in the back, a silent anchor in the sea of quiet turmoil. His clones had all been dispelled, their memories flooding his mind, a chaotic patchwork of desperate fights, tactical retreats, and small, crucial victories. He had saved Bakugo, but the villains had still achieved a key objective. They had shattered the illusion of safety that surrounded UA High. They had proven that the students were vulnerable. The news of the attack had already broken, and the public reaction was swift and merciless. A second major villain attack on the same class of first-year students in less than a semester was not just a security breach, it was a catastrophic failure. UA, the unshakable bastion of heroism, was suddenly on the defensive, its reputation hanging by a thread. A press conference was held, where a grim-faced Principal Nezu and a bandaged Aizawa bowed an apology to the nation, promising a full investigation and new, drastic security measures. The most immediate of these measures was the proposal of a dormitory system. UA would become a fully boarded school, allowing the faculty to protect the students 24/7. It was a radical step, and it required the full consent of the parents, many of whom were now terrified for their children's safety. In a private meeting room, All Might, in his Yagi form, met with Naruto. The hero looked older, the weight of the world heavy on his skeletal frame. The villain's objective was young Bakugo, Yagi said, his voice a low, worried rumble. But you were the one who stopped them. You were the one who turned their entire operation into a failure. They underestimated us, Naruto replied simply. They underestimated you, Yagi corrected, his gaze intense. The Hero Commission has seen the reports. The other teachers, the students. They all saw what you did. You are no longer just a promising student, young Uzumaki. You are a strategic asset. And a high-value target. He leaned forward. This dorm system. It is as much for your protection as it is for young Bakugos. The League of Villains will not forget this humiliation. They will come for you. Let them come, Naruto said, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of cold, hard steel. I'll be ready. Later that night, as Naruto was packing up his things from his room at home, preparing for the move to the dorms, his phone buzzed. It was Mirko. I just got back in town, she said, her voice a low, dangerous purr that did little to hide her concern. Heard you had some fun while I was gone. Fought another army? Something like that, he replied, a small smile touching his lips. And you didn't invite me? She teased, though he could hear the worry underneath. Some date you are, leaving a girl to fight monsters all by herself. You handled yourself just fine, he said. I saw the reports. 2 nomus. That's a new record, even for you. Yeah, well, she said, her voice softening. I heard you handled yourself, too. Are you okay, Naruto? The genuine, unvarnished concern in her voice caught him off guard. I'm fine, Rumi, he said, and for the first time, he realized he was telling the complete truth. He was surrounded by friends, protected by teachers, and now, he had someone who worried about him, not as a weapon or a symbol, but as a person. I'm always fine. Good, she said. Now, about that dessert you owe me. The move to the newly constructed Alliance Heights dormitory was a surreal experience for the students of Class 1A. One by one, Aizawa and All Might visited their homes, bowing in apology to their parents and explaining the necessity of the new system. For most, it was a smooth transition. But the visit to the Bakugo household was an explosive affair, and the one to the Midoriya household was a tearful, emotional negotiation, culminating in All Might vowing to protect Izuku with his life. Naruto's parents, Arashi and Yashima, accepted the news with a grim understanding. They had seen the news. They knew the danger their son was in. They hugged him tightly, their fear a palpable thing, but their pride in him was even stronger. Move-in day arrived, and the students gathered in front of the massive, state-of-the-art dormitory building. It was more like a luxury apartment complex than a school dorm. For now, Aizawa announced, the most important thing is for you all to settle in. Unpack your things. The dorms are co-ed, but the boys and girls wings are separated. Behave yourselves. The day was spent unpacking and exploring their new home. That evening, in an attempt to foster some much-needed normalcy and fun, Mina Ashido proposed a best room contest. Eager for a distraction, the class agreed, touring each other's rooms. They saw Kirishima's manly, gym-themed room, Jiro's punk rock paradise, and Todoroki's traditional, minimalist Japanese-style room, which he had apparently renovated in a single afternoon. Finally, they arrived at Naruto's room at the end of the hall. They were expecting something extravagant, something mysterious, something that reflected his immense power. When he opened the door, they were met with stark, almost monastic simplicity. The room was bare. There was a simple futon rolled up neatly in the corner. The walls were empty, save for a single, beautifully drawn calligraphy scroll of the kanji for shinobi. The only other furniture was a low wooden table in the center of the room and a small, meticulously cared for bonsai tree on the windowsill. The room was clean, ordered, and completely devoid of any personal clutter. It wasn't the room of a teenager, it was the cell of a warrior monk. Whoa, Uraka whispered. It's so clean. Where's all your stuff? Kaminari asked, looking around the empty space. "This is my stuff," Naruto replied with a shrug. "I don't need much." The class didn't know what to make of it. It was another piece of the puzzle that was Naruto Uzumaki, a piece that only deepened the mystery. Later that night, after the contest was over, the winner being the sugar-fueled Sato for bribing the girls with cake, the students of Class 1A gathered in the common room. For the first time, they were not just a class. They were a family, a strange, dysfunctional, and powerful one, living under one roof. They had faced villains, tasted failure, and pushed themselves to their limits. The dorm was more than just a building, it was a fortress, a sanctuary where they could be safe. As Naruto looked around at his friends, laughing and joking, a rare, genuine sense of peace settled over him. He had a home. He had a family. He had a purpose. But in the back of his mind, he knew this peace was a fragile, temporary thing. The League of Villains was still out there, regrouping. All for One, the secret master of the underworld, was stirring in the shadows. And the world was watching, waiting for the next move from the heroes of UA High. The next chapter of their story was about to begin, and it would be the most dangerous one yet. The days leading up to the Provisional Hero License exam were a blur of intense, focused training. The students of Class 1A were tasked with developing their own ultimate moves, techniques that would define them as heroes. The training facility, dubbed Gym Gamma, became their second home, a place of constant explosions, ice formations, and controlled chaos. Izuku, taking Naruto's advice to heart, completely reinvented his fighting style. He developed one for all, full cowling, shoot style, shifting the focus of his power from his ruined arms to his powerful legs, turning him into a high-speed, kicking-based fighter. Bakugo refined his AP shot into a focused, long-range laser, while Todoroki worked on controlling both his fire and ice simultaneously. Naruto's training was, as always, unconventional. While his classmates focused on new applications of their power, he focused on refining his old ones. He spent hours in quiet meditation, not to increase his power, but to expand his sensory range, to feel the subtle shifts in the energy of every living thing within a multi-kilometer radius. To the others, it looked like he was napping. In reality, he was becoming a living radar system. The day of the exam arrived. Thousands of students from hero schools across Japan gathered in a massive arena. The first test was explained, a massive battle royale. Each student had 3 targets on their body. To pass, they had to eliminate 2 other students by placing balls on their targets. It's a tradition for the other schools to team up and crush the UA students first, a student from another school sneered as they walked onto the field. Especially your class. Consider yourselves the main event. As the exam started, his words proved true. Hundreds of students immediately turned, their quirks powering up, a massive, unified wave of hostility aimed directly at Class 1A. "They're not wasting any time," Kirishima yelled, hardening his body. "Everyone, group up. Form a defensive circle," Ida commanded. But Naruto stepped forward, a calm, unshakable rock against the approaching tide. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "We're not going on the defensive. We're going to prove why we're the main event." He made a single hand sign. Haju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In 100 puffs of smoke, a small army of Naruto clones appeared, forming a perfect, multi-layered perimeter around Class 1A. But they weren't just a wall. "Todoroki!" A clone yelled. "Ice ramp, 30 degrees, northwest." Todoroki, without hesitation, stomped his foot, and a massive ramp of ice shot up. "Bakugo! AP shot! Use the ramp! Take out that group with the projectile quirks!" Another clone commanded. Bakugo grinned and launched himself up the ramp, firing a perfectly aimed blast that scattered a key group of attackers. One by one, the clones began to issue orders, turning Class 1A from a huddled group of targets into a coordinated, multi-pronged engine of destruction. They were no longer just 20 students, they were a single, tactical unit, with Naruto as their central command. He used his sensory abilities to identify threats, his clones to relay orders, and his classmates' powerful quirks as the weapons. The other schools, who had expected to crush a disorganized group of famous but inexperienced students, found themselves facing a professional hero team. Their unified assault shattered against the coordinated defense and counterattack of Class 1A. Within 10 minutes, the tide had turned completely. The hunters had become the hunted. One by one, the students of Class 1A, protected and guided by Naruto's strategy, picked off their targets, easily securing the 2 eliminations they needed to pass. By the time the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the first test, all 20 students of Class 1A had passed, a feat unheard of in the history of the exam. They stood together in the center of the massive field, surrounded by the defeated students of a dozen other schools. They had faced down an army and had won without a single casualty. Naruto had not only ensured his own victory, he had guaranteed the victory of his entire class. The message to the rest of the hero world was clear: Class 1A was not just a collection of powerful individuals. They were a force. The 100 or so students who passed the first test were given a short break before being led to a new, even larger arena. This one was a sprawling, disaster-stricken cityscape, complete with collapsed buildings, raging fires, and panicked civilians. Actors from the Help Us Company, or HUC, for the second and final test, the proctor, Mara, announced with a tired sigh, "You will be judged on your ability to conduct a rescue operation. The HUC actors will be playing the parts of injured civilians. Your job is to rescue them, administer first aid, and transport them to the designated safe zone. We will be scoring you based on your efficiency, your decision-making, and your ability to minimize collateral damage. The test begins now." As the other students rushed into the disaster zone, forming teams and calling out to the injured, Naruto once again took a different approach. He created 100 clones, just as before. "Spread out," he commanded. "This isn't a fight, it's a search and rescue. 1 clone per civilian. Assess their injuries, perform basic first aid, and report their location and status. Do not move them unless absolutely necessary. The rest of you, map out the safest extraction routes. Go." The clones scattered, a silent, efficient network of first responders. While other students were still trying to lift a single piece of rubble, Naruto's clones had already located and triaged over half of the civilian actors. In the observation area, the pro heroes scoring the exam watched, baffled. "Is this even allowed?" one hero asked. "He's not rescuing anyone himself." "The rules don't forbid it," another replied, scribbling notes. "His method is unorthodox, but look at the results. He's managing the entire disaster zone like a professional incident commander." Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the arena. A new group of figures appeared, led by the number 10 hero, Gang Orca, who was playing the part of a master villain. "I am the supervillain, Titanic," he roared, his gang of henchmen charging forward. "And I'm here to crush you fledgling heroes." The scenario had changed. It was now a rescue mission under active villain assault. "Divide your forces," Ida commanded his group. "Some of us will hold off the villains while the others continue the rescue." It was the logical, textbook response. But Naruto saw the flaw. "No," his voice cut through the air, relayed by a clone to every member of Class 1A. "That's what they want. They want to split our attention, to force us into a fight." He stood on a high vantage point, the original Naruto, his eyes closed, processing the information from his 100 clones. He was seeing the entire battlefield at once. Todoroki, Bakugo, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu. His voice commanded. "You are the vanguard. Your job is not to defeat Gang Orca. It is to contain him. Stall him. Use large-scale attacks to keep him and his men pinned in the central plaza. Do not let them reach the rescue zones. The rest of you," his orders continued, "ignore the villains completely. Your mission has not changed. Focus on the rescue. I will guide you." A new strategy was implemented. While Todoroki's ice walls and Bakugo's explosions created a chaotic, impenetrable barrier around Gang Orca's forces, the other students, guided by Naruto's clones, moved with renewed purpose. A clone would appear beside Uraka. "There's a family of 3 trapped under a collapsed bridge 200 meters east of your position. The structure is unstable. Use your quirk to lift the debris, but be gentle." Another clone would appear next to a group from Shiketsu High. "The water mains have burst in Sector Gamma. There are civilians at risk of drowning. We need someone with an elemental quirk to divert the flow." He was everywhere at once, a calm, omniscient voice guiding the scattered, panicked students, turning their chaotic efforts into a single, efficient rescue operation. He wasn't just helping his own class, he was commanding the entire field. Gang Orca, a powerful pro-hero, found himself completely stonewalled, unable to break through the relentless, coordinated assault of UA's heaviest hitters, who were fighting with a synergy they had never before displayed. By the time the final buzzer sounded, every single civilian actor had been safely rescued and transported to the safe zone. Gang Orca and his men had never even gotten close to them. The students stood in the ruined cityscape, panting, exhausted, but with a new sense of unity. They had worked together, students from a dozen different schools, as a single, cohesive unit. And they had done it under the flawless, invisible command of one boy. As the results were posted, it was no surprise. All 20 students of Class 1A had passed, receiving their provisional hero licenses. But as Naruto accepted his license, He knew it was just a piece of paper. The real test was still to come. Chapter 6. The return to the Alliance Heights dormitory was a triumphant one. The students of Class 1A, now all officially holders of a Provisional hero license, were buzzing with a new, professional energy. They had faced a trial designed to break them and had emerged not just intact, but stronger and more unified than ever. That evening, as the class celebrated with a massive, home-cooked meal, Naruto found himself being pulled aside by a familiar, skeletal figure. All Might, in his Yagi form, led him to the roof of the dormitory, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warm celebration below. "I watched the exam, young Uzumaki," Yagi began, his voice a low, serious rumble as he looked out at the city lights. "What you did? It was beyond impressive. You didn't just pass a test. You commanded a battlefield. You turned a chaotic group of frightened students into a cohesive, effective rescue unit." "They have good instincts," Naruto replied with a shrug. "They just needed a little direction." "Don't be modest," Yagi countered, turning to face him, his expression grim. "That kind of strategic thinking, that level of command and control. It's the mark of a great general, not a first-year student. Every day, the mystery of who you are deepens," he sighed, a weary, rattling sound. "And every day, the danger you are in grows." He looked at Naruto, his eyes filled with a heavy, ancient burden. "I told you about my injury, about my fight with the man who gave it to me. His name is All for One. He is the secret king of Japan's underworld, a villain who has lived for centuries, stealing and stockpiling quirks. He is the one pulling the strings of the League of Villains." "I figured as much," Naruto said quietly. "Shigaraki is just a pawn." "Yes," Yagi agreed. "And All for One is a master of a game that has been played in the shadows for generations. I defeated him once, but he is not gone. He is out there, rebuilding, planning. And he knows about you." He paused, the weight of his next words heavy in the air. "After my fight with him, my closest friend, a hero named Sir Nightai, had a vision. A prophecy. He saw a future where I would face a great evil and die." Naruto's expression remained calm, but a new, sharp intensity entered his eyes. "I have been fighting against that future ever since," Yagi continued. "I chose young Midoriya to be my successor, to be the hope that would live on after I am gone. But then you appeared. A boy with the power of a god and the mind of a general, an anomaly that no one, not even a man who can see the future, could have predicted." He looked at Naruto, a desperate, pleading hope in his eyes. "You are a variable in this equation, young Uzumaki. A piece that does not belong on the board. You are the one thing he cannot predict. You may be the key to changing that future." The weight of the revelation was immense. Naruto was no longer just a hero in training. He was being positioned as a potential savior, a trump card in a war that had been raging for a century. "I don't believe in destiny," Naruto said, his voice firm, unshakable. "A person's future is not written in stone. It's something you build, with your own two hands." He looked at Yagi, a fire in his eyes. "I will not let you die. And I will not let him win." "That is not a prediction. It is a promise." As they stood there in the quiet of the night, a new, unspoken alliance was forged. The symbol of peace and the child from another world, united against a common, ancient evil. Naruto's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from the heavy moment. It was a text from Mirko. "Heard you passed your test, pretty boy. Don't think that gets you out of our dessert date. My treat. Tomorrow night. Don't be late." A small, genuine smile touched Naruto's lips. The weight of the world was on his shoulders, but he wasn't carrying it alone. He had friends to protect, a promise to keep, and a date with a reckless, beautiful rabbit hero. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The next evening, Naruto met Mirko in a trendy downtown district known for its dessert cafes. She was leaning against a wall, dressed in stylish streetwear, a playful smirk on her face as he approached. The frantic energy of the media and the weight of the world seemed a million miles away. "You're late, pretty boy," she said, her voice a low, teasing drawl. "I was fashionably late," he retorted with a grin. "Builds anticipation. Keep it up and the only thing you'll be building is a hospital bill," she shot back, though there was no heat in it. She fell into step beside him. "So, where are we going? I hope it's someplace that serves carrot cake. I've been craving it." "I know a place," he said, leading her down a side street to a small, unassuming cafe. The date was easy, comfortable. They talked about everything and nothing. She complained about the Hero Commission's bureaucracy, and he told her a heavily redacted but amusing story about a teacher who was obsessed with frogs. They were from different worlds, a pro hero at the top of her game and a boy with an impossible secret, but they found an easy, common ground in their shared love of a good fight and their disdain for authority. "So," she said, leaning forward as she finished the last bite of her cake. "Now that you've got your license, what's next? You gonna start your own agency? Become a sidekick?" "No," Naruto said, his expression turning serious for a moment. "I'm going to get stronger. And I'm going to make my friends stronger. A storm is coming, Rumi. A big one. We all need to be ready for it." His words hung in the air, a sudden, cold premonition. Before she could ask what he meant, both of their phones buzzed with a high-priority alert, the kind reserved for national-level threats. The message was stark and terrifying. A massive villain attack was underway in Kamino Ward, Yokohama. Multiple nomas were on a rampage, and at the center of it all, a single, unnamed villain was leveling entire city blocks with dozens of stolen quirks. It was him. All for one. "That's..." Mirko's voice was a low whisper, her playful demeanor gone, replaced by the cold, hard focus of a top-tier hero. "That's a war zone." Naruto was already on his feet, a Hiraishin kunai in his hand. "All Might is on his way there," he said, his voice grim. "It's a trap. It's meant for him." "Then we're going too," she said, her fists clenched. "He'll need backup." "No," Naruto said, his voice firm. He looked her in the eye, and she saw in them not the cocky kid, but the ancient, weary general. "Your job is to handle the nomas. Keep the other heroes safe. Keep the damage contained. The main event. He's mine. Don't be an idiot, Naruto." She shot back, grabbing his arm. "You don't know who you're facing. That's the man who almost killed All Might. And All Might is the man who is prophesied to die fighting him," he replied, his voice quiet but unshakable. "I made him a promise. I'm not going to let that happen." He placed a hand over hers, his grip gentle but firm. "Trust me, Rumi. Keep everyone else safe. I'll handle him." Before she could argue, he vanished in a yellow flash, leaving her alone in the quiet cafe, the half-eaten cake and the blaring emergency alert the only evidence of the calm before the storm. She stood there for a moment, a storm of fear and fury in her heart, before her expression hardened into a mask of pure, feral determination. "You better come back in one piece, you damn brat," she growled to the empty air, and then she was gone, a blur of motion bursting out of the cafe and into the night, heading for the war that awaited them all. Kamino Ward was a war zone. The city block where the League of Villains had their hideout had been completely leveled, a massive crater marking the epicenter of a battle between legends. All Might, his body battered and his time running out, stood against the man in the life support mask, all for one. The air crackled with the pressure of their immense power. "You've gotten weaker, All Might," all for one's voice, distorted and synthesized, echoed through the ruins. "That form of yours is a flickering candle in the wind. How sad." He raised a hand, his arm swelling grotesquely with a dozen stolen quirks. "Let me put you out of your misery." He unleashed a devastating blast of air pressure, a move that dwarfed any of his students' attacks. All Might met it with a punch of his own, the two forces colliding in a shockwave that shattered the windows of the remaining buildings for blocks. A few streets away, the situation was just as dire. A group of pro-heroes, including Endeavor and Gran Torino, were locked in a desperate battle against a new breed of intelligent nomas. They were being overwhelmed. Just as a Nomu was about to crush a downed hero, a black and white blur slammed into it with the force of a meteor. Mirko landed in the middle of the street, a three-point landing that cracked the asphalt, her red eyes blazing with feral energy. "Sorry I'm late to the party," she growled, a wide, bloodthirsty grin on her face. "Looks like you could use a real hero around here." "Mirko. What are you doing here?" Endeavor roared, blasting a Nomu with a jet of flame. Cleaning up a mess, she shot back, and then she was a whirlwind of motion. She moved with a speed that was almost impossible to track, her powerful legs delivering bone-shattering kicks. She wasn't just fighting, she was a force of nature, a one-woman wrecking crew who tore through the nomas with a joyful, terrifying ferocity. While the heroes battled in the streets, another battle was raging in the sky. Izuku, Kirishima, Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki had enacted their own desperate rescue mission, using a combination of their quirks to fly through the air and snatch Bakugo from the clutches of the League of Villains. They had succeeded, but the victory was a fleeting one. On the ground, All Might was fading. He had pushed past his limit, the last embers of One for All burning out. He was struggling to maintain his muscle form, his body flickering like a faulty hologram. All for One stood over him, preparing the final, killing blow. "Goodbye, symbol of peace," the villain said, his voice laced with triumphant finality. "I don't think so." The voice was calm, quiet, and it cut through the roar of the battle like a razor. All for One froze. He turned. Standing on a pile of rubble, his hands in the pockets of his suit, was Naruto Uzumaki. He looked completely out of place, a silent, unmoving figure in a world of chaos. "And who might you be?" All for One asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in his voice. "Another one of his little protégés?" "I'm the variable," Naruto replied, his blue eyes locking onto the villain's masked face. "The one you didn't account for." He vanished in a yellow flash, reappearing directly in front of All for One, between the villain and the fallen All Might. He hadn't just moved, he had placed himself as a human shield, a final, absolute line of defense. All for One stared at the boy, his centuries of experience and his countless stolen quirks screaming at him that something was profoundly, fundamentally wrong. This boy had no quirk he could sense, no power he could steal. He was a void, an anomaly. "I made a promise," Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "I promised him that I wouldn't let him die. And I always keep my promises." He took one hand out of his pocket and held it up. A swirling, blue sphere of pure, concentrated energy, the Rasengan, spun to life in his palm, its sound a high-pitched, terrifying hum. The final battle for the fate of the symbol of peace was about to begin. And the prophecy of his death had just met its ultimate, unpredictable counter. All for One tilted his head, the gesture a mockery of curiosity. "A Rasengan?" He mused, the name foreign but the swirling energy in the boy's palm undeniable. "A fascinating quirk. A self-sustaining vortex of kinetic energy. I think I'll take it." He shot his arm forward, black and red tendrils erupting from his fingertips, a quirk designed to steal the powers of others. The tendrils latched onto Naruto's arm, ready to rip his power from his very soul. But they found nothing. There was no quirk factor to steal. There was no genetic marker to latch onto. The tendrils simply passed through Naruto's chakra, finding no purchase. "What is this?" All for One's voice lost its curious edge, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "There's nothing there. You're empty." "I'm not the one who's empty," Naruto replied, his voice cold. He didn't use a smokescreen. He thrust his hand forward, slamming the Rasengan directly into the villain's chest. The impact was immense. All for One was launched backward, a grinding, concussive force tearing through his suit and sending him skidding across the crater, his life support mask cracking under the strain. He had been forced to activate multiple defensive quirks at the last second to avoid being torn apart. "Impressive," All for One coughed, pushing himself up. "Very impressive. You are no mere child." He raised his arm, which swelled and warped into a grotesque cannon of flesh and steel. "But you are a fool to stand against a king." He unleashed a torrent of destructive power, a combination of air cannons, laser beams, and kinetic force multipliers that converged into a single, city-block leveling blast. High above, the news helicopters captured the scene, their cameras broadcasting the cataclysmic attack to a horrified world. But as the dust settled, the target was unharmed. Naruto stood in the center of the blast radius, a single clone in front of him having taken the brunt of the attack and dissipated. But the real Naruto was different now. Orange pigmentation had appeared around his eyes, his pupils shifting into the horizontal bars of a toad. He stood perfectly still, radiating an aura of immense, natural energy that was so powerful it seemed to warp the very air around him. What is that form?" All for One stammered, his sensors going haywire. "Another quirk?" "This is Sage Mode," Naruto announced, his voice deeper, resonating with the power of the earth itself. "And this is where you fall." He vanished. Not with Hiraishin, but with a burst of pure, natural speed that was faster than any quirk All for One could track. He appeared in front of the villain and delivered a single, devastating punch. The force was incredible, imbued with the weight of nature. All for One was sent flying, crashing through the wreckage of a building. "This is for my friends," Naruto's voice echoed through the ruins. He appeared above the dazed villain, his hands forming a new, larger Rasengan, a swirling blue sun of immense power. Giant Rasengan. He descended like a meteor, slamming the massive sphere of energy down onto All for One. The resulting explosion was not a flash of fire, but a silent, grinding implosion of force that carved a perfect, hemispherical crater into the ground, obliterating everything within it. When the energy dissipated, All for One lay at the bottom of the new crater, his body broken, his life support system shattered, utterly and completely defeated. Naruto landed silently in the center of his own destruction, his sage mode receding, his suit still remarkably pristine. He looked down at the broken man, then over at the flickering, skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi, who was staring up at him, his one good eye wide with a disbelief that was beyond words. The live broadcast captured the final, iconic image, the fading symbol of peace, his true, weakened form revealed to the world, and standing victorious over the nation's greatest evil was not a new symbol, but an enigma. A boy who had promised to break a prophecy, and had done so with a power the world had never seen. The old era was over. A new one had just begun. The world was silent. For a full 10 seconds after All for One's defeat, the only sound was the wind whipping through the ruins of Kamino Ward and the distant whirring of helicopter blades. The live broadcast captured it all: the broken villain, the skeletal hero, and the boy in the suit who stood victorious over both. Then, the heroes arrived. Mirko was the first, a black and white blur landing at the edge of the crater, her eyes wide as she took in the sheer, hemispherical perfection of the destruction. She saw the unconscious form of All for One, then the weakened, skeletal All Might, and finally, Naruto, standing in the center of it all, looking completely unharmed. "Naruto," she yelled, her voice a mixture of relief and pure, undiluted shock. "Are you okay?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable, and gave a simple nod. Endeavor, Gran Torino, and the other pros arrived moments later, skidding to a halt. They stared at the scene, their minds unable to process the reality of it. The greatest villain in their nation's history, a monster of myth and legend, had been defeated. And the one left standing was an All Might. What have you done?" Endeavor breathed, his own flames sputtering in the face of such an overwhelming display of power. Before Naruto could answer, a new presence made itself known. A specialized police unit, led by a man with the head of a dog, Kenji Tsurugame, began to secure the perimeter. They were followed by a convoy of massive, heavily armored transport vehicles. They had been prepared for this, for the day All for One would finally be captured. "Secure the prisoner," Tsurugame commanded, his voice grim. As the specialized restraints were being brought forward, All for One began to stir. He was broken, his body shattered, but his will remained. He pushed himself up on one elbow, his lipless mouth twisting into a grotesque smile. He wasn't looking at All Might. He was looking at Naruto. "You." All for One rasped, his voice a distorted, gurgling sound. "You are not of this world. Are you? That power. It is not a quirk. It is something else. Something pure." He let out a rattling chuckle. "How wonderful. After all these years. A new game." He then turned his gaze to the fallen All Might. "You have lost, Toshinori. You may have won the battle, but your time is over. The world has seen your true form. Their precious symbol is a lie. And my successor, Tomura Shigaraki. He is free. The seeds of chaos have been planted." With that, he was silent, allowing the police to fit him with a series of complex, quirk-suppressing restraints. He was loaded into the transport, his final, cryptic words hanging in the air like a curse. All Might, with Gran Torino's help, finally struggled to his feet. He looked at his hands, then at the news helicopters still circling above. He knew the world had seen him. His secret, his lie, was out. He was no longer the symbol of peace. He looked at Naruto, the boy who had saved his life and broken a prophecy. You did it, young Uzumaki," he whispered, his voice filled with a profound gratitude and an even more profound fear. "You saved us." "I kept my promise," Naruto replied simply. The live broadcast finally cut out, but the damage was done. The world had just witnessed the end of an era. The symbol of peace had fallen, a new, ultimate evil had been revealed, and an unknown, impossibly powerful teenager had appeared and single-handedly ended the war. The questions began immediately, in every home, in every newsroom, in every government building across the globe. Who was Naruto Uzumaki? What was his power? And in a world without its symbol of peace, was he a savior? Or was he something far, far more terrifying? The Battle of Kamino was over, but the war for the future had just begun. The Battle of Kamino Ward ended, and the world held its breath. The live broadcast had shown everything: the fall of All Might, the rise of a new evil, and the arrival of an impossible savior. In the days that followed, society teetered on the brink of chaos. All Might's retirement left a void of hope that crime gleefully began to fill. The Hero Public Safety Commission was in a state of unprecedented crisis. They were faced with two problems, each a nation-destabilizing threat. The first was how to present a new hierarchy of heroes to a world that had lost its symbol. The second, and far more pressing, problem was what to do about Naruto Uzumaki. He was a student. He had acted without a license. And he had single-handedly defeated a villain who had brought the entire hero system to its knees. He was a legal nightmare and a public relations paradox. To punish him would be to punish the boy who saved their greatest hero. To ignore him was to ignore the most powerful being in the country. After days of frantic, closed-door meetings, they made a decision. A desperate, radical, and game-changing gamble. They announced an emergency, unscheduled broadcast of the hero billboard chart JP. It was a move to restore public confidence, to establish a new order. In the common room of the Alliance Heights dormitory, the students of Class 1A watched the broadcast, a tense silence hanging over them. They knew this was a pivotal moment in history. The rankings were announced, starting from number 10. Hawks, the winged hero, had risen to number 3. Mirko had held her position at number 5. The rankings were a shuffle of familiar faces, all leading to the one inevitable conclusion. And now, the announcer's voice was grave, the hero who will carry the weight of our society on his shoulders. The new number 1 hero is. The screen showed footage of the Hasu and Kamino incidents, a montage of raging blue fire. Endeavor. In his agency, Endeavor watched, his fists clenched. He had done it. He was at the top. But the victory felt hollow, unearned. Is officially ranked as the number 2 hero, the announcer continued, and a collective gasp went through the nation. Endeavor's head snapped up. Number 2? Impossible. Who could possibly be? The screen changed. It showed grainy footage from the sports festival, a boy teleporting across an arena. It showed a figure in a suit effortlessly defeating the hero killer. It showed a boy wreathed in natural energy, holding a swirling blue sun, standing victorious over the shattered form of All for One. In an unprecedented decision by the Hero Public Safety Commission, the announcer's voice was trembling with the weight of his own words, factoring in overwhelming public support, a formal recommendation from All Might himself, and an analysis of power that defies all known metrics. The new number 1 hero of Japan, effective immediately, is the UA High first-year student. The screen showed Naruto's face, his expression calm, his blue eyes staring out at the world. The shinobi hero, Shinobi. Naruto Uzumaki. The world broke. In the 1A common room, there was a stunned, disbelieving silence. Kaminari fainted. Uraka just stared, her mouth agape. Bakugo looked at the screen, his expression not of anger, but of a profound, earth-shattering confusion that was almost worse. Their classmate, their friend, the boy who sat behind Izuku in class, was now officially the strongest hero in the country. In his agency, Endeavor watched the screen, a torrent of pure, incandescent rage building in his chest. A child. A student. He had been surpassed by a child who had come out of nowhere. He was about to unleash a torrent of flame that would have incinerated his entire office, but then the footage of Naruto defeating All for One played again. He saw the effortless power, the absolute dominance. He saw the boy do what he, in his heart of hearts, knew he could never have done. The rage didn't vanish, but it was joined by a new, bitter, and infuriating feeling: respect. The kid had earned it. And he hated him for it. In her penthouse apartment, Mirko watched the announcement, a slow, wide, predatory grin spreading across her face. Well, I'll be damned, she purred, taking a long drink from a bottle. My brat's the king of the world. She let out a loud, joyous laugh. On the roof of the dormitory, Naruto watched the city lights, his phone buzzing in his pocket with a single text from Mirko, a picture of his face on the TV screen, followed by a string of rabbit and crown emojis. He looked at it, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face, and then put the phone away. The titles, the rankings, the fame. They were meaningless. They were just tools. And in a world that had lost its symbol, he knew he would have to become a new one. Not a symbol of peace, but a symbol of unshakable, absolute strength. A shinobi, standing in the light. The title of number 1 hero was not a trophy, it was a target. Naruto learned this the very next day. His life at UA was transformed overnight. He was no longer just a student, he was an institution, a symbol, and a problem. Principal Nezu had called an emergency meeting with him, Aizawa, and All Might. The atmosphere in the principal's office was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with villains. The Hero Public Safety Commission has, to put it mildly, forced our hand, Nezu began, his paw steepled before him. By officially ranking you as number 1, they have shifted a national-level responsibility onto the shoulders of a first-year student. Legally, it's a gray area the size of a continent. They're using him, Aizawa grumbled from the corner, his eyes tired but sharp. They can't control him, so they're trying to contain him with rules and public expectation. They've given him the rank, but they've also given him a leash. It is a heavy burden, young Uzumaki, All Might said, his voice filled with a familiar, weary concern. The world will look to you for hope, for answers. Villains will see you as the ultimate prize. Are you prepared for that? Naruto, who had been silently listening, finally spoke. It's just a title, he said, his voice calm and steady. It doesn't change who I am. It just changes how people see me. He looked at the 3 faculty members, his gaze direct and unwavering. And I can use that. His simple, confident acceptance of the impossible situation seemed to surprise them. The commission has assigned a security detail to you, Aizawa continued, pulling out a file. You will have a pro-hero escort to and from school. Your movements will be monitored. You are now considered a critical state asset. No, Naruto said simply. The 3 teachers stared at him. No? Aizawa repeated, his eyebrow twitching. No security detail, Naruto clarified. It's a waste of resources, and it'll just make me a bigger target. My clones are all the security I need. He stood up. I appreciate the concern. But I will not be treated like a prisoner. I am a student of this school. I will attend my classes, I will train with my friends, and I will continue to learn how to be a hero. The only thing that has changed is the nameplate. Is that understood? He wasn't asking for permission. He was informing them of a fact. Nezu, after a long, silent moment of analysis, let out a small, delighted chuckle. Of course, Uzumaki-san. Your autonomy will be respected. For now. The changes were felt most keenly in the dormitory. His classmates didn't know how to act around him. They would fall silent when he entered a room, their conversation stilted and awkward. They were his friends, but he was also their superior, the highest-ranked hero in the nation. He found Izuku on the balcony of his room that evening, staring at the sky. It's weird, isn't it? Izuku said, not looking at him. Everything's different now. Only if we let it be, Naruto replied, leaning against the railing beside him. But you're the number 1, Izuku stammered. You're on the same level as All Might. No, I'm not, Naruto said, his voice soft. He was a symbol of peace. I'm just a kid with a weird quirk who's good at fighting. He looked at his friend, a genuine, warm smile on his face. And I'm still the guy who's counting on you to have his back when things get tough. That hasn't changed. It never will. The simple, honest words seemed to break the spell. Izuku looked at him, and for the first time since the announcement, he didn't see the number 1 hero. He just saw his friend, Naruto. Later that night, as he was about to go to sleep, his phone buzzed. It was a video call from Mirko. He answered. Her face filled the screen, a wide, feral grin plastered on it. She was in her hero costume, perched on a gargoyle overlooking the city. So, she began, her voice a low, teasing purr. I just got out of a 7-hour meeting with the HPSC. They're all terrified of you. It was hilarious. Glad I could provide some entertainment, he said with a chuckle. They wanted to assign me as your official mentor and bodyguard, she continued, rolling her eyes. I told them I was too busy being your girlfriend to be your babysitter. Naruto's face flushed, a rare sight. You didn't? I did, she cackled. You should have seen their faces. Little government stooges almost had a collective aneurysm. She leaned closer to the camera, her red eyes sparkling with mischief. So, Mr. Number 1. You still owe me that dessert. Don't think your fancy new title gets you out of it. Wouldn't dream of it, he replied, his smile returning. The world was chaos. The pressure was immense. But in the quiet moments, with his friends by his side and a reckless, beautiful rabbit hero on his screen, Naruto Uzumaki felt like he could handle anything. Naruto's refusal to accept a security detail sent a clear message to the Hero Public Safety Commission: he would not be controlled. This, combined with Mirko's brazen declaration to the press, created a political firestorm. The HPSC was faced with an unprecedented situation. Their newly minted number 1 hero was a teenager who answered to no one, and his closest confidant and rumored girlfriend was the fiercely independent number 5 hero, who despised authority. They were a PR nightmare and an uncontrollable force of power. The commission's response was swift and decisive. A week later, another emergency meeting was called in Principal Nezu's office. This time, a stern-faced woman in a sharp business suit, the president of the HPSC herself, was present. Uzumaki-san, the president began, her voice cold and sharp as glass. The world is in a state of unrest. Crime is on the rise. The people are looking for a symbol, and we have given them one. We have given them you. She slid a thick file across the table. However, the public is beginning to ask a very logical question: why is the number 1 hero in the country spending his days in a classroom? Naruto remained silent, his gaze steady. It is a logistical and public relations absurdity, she continued. We cannot have our top-rated hero learning algebra while villains run rampant. Therefore, the commission has made a decision. Effective immediately, you are being granted a special dispensation. You will graduate from UA High, effective today. Your provisional license will be upgraded to a full pro license. You will begin official hero duties immediately. Aizawa and All Might started to protest, but Naruto held up a hand, silencing them. He looked at the HPSC president, a slow, understanding nod his only reply. He had seen this coming. The logic was undeniable. How could he be a symbol if he wasn't in the field? How could he protect his friends if he was sitting next to them in class? I understand, Naruto said, his voice calm. It makes sense. We are not unreasonable, the president continued, a hint of surprise in her eyes at his easy acceptance. You are still young. You will need a partner, a mentor to guide you through the intricacies of pro-hero life. She looked at a second file. Given her existing rapport with you and her proven combat effectiveness, we have assigned the number 5 hero, Mirko, as your official partner. You will operate as an independent hero duo, under the direct oversight of the commission. It was a perfect trap, disguised as a promotion. They were giving him what he wanted, the freedom to act, but they were tying him to Mirko, hoping she could be a leash, a way to monitor and control him. They had underestimated them both. The news was delivered to Class 1A by Aizawa, his voice a low, reluctant grumble. As of today, he announced, Naruto Uzumaki is no longer your classmate. He is a pro-hero. The room was filled with a stunned, heartbroken silence. They had just gotten used to the idea of him being their classmate and the number 1. Now, he was being taken from them entirely. That's not fair, Kirishima yelled. He's one of us, Uraka cried out. Izuku just stared at Naruto, a look of profound sadness in his eyes. Their journey together, the one they had started on a junk-filled beach, had reached a sudden, unexpected fork in the road. Naruto stood up and walked to the front of the class. This doesn't change anything, he said, his voice firm, his gaze sweeping over his friends. I'm not leaving you. I'm just changing my address. This school, this class. You're my home. I'll still be here. I'll still be watching over you. He looked at Izuku, a silent promise passing between them. And I'll still be expecting you all to catch up to me. So don't slack off. He gave them one last, confident grin, and then he was gone. Later that day, he stood on the roof of Mirko's penthouse, his UA uniform replaced by his white flak jacket. She was there, leaning against the railing, already in her hero costume. So, she said, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across her face. Partners. Partners, he confirmed. The commission thinks I'm your babysitter, she said, her voice a low purr. They think I'm gonna keep you in line. Are you? He asked, a cheeky grin on his face. She laughed, a loud, joyous sound that echoed across the city. Hell no, she said, turning to face him, her red eyes blazing with excitement. I'm gonna help you cause as much trouble as possible. She jerked a thumb toward the sprawling city below. Come on, number 1. Let's go to work. He stood beside her, no longer a student, but a pro-hero. The most powerful hero in the world. And his first official patrol was about to begin. Naruto Uzumaki's first day as a pro-hero was not a quiet one. The Hero Public Safety Commission, in a desperate attempt to control the narrative and project an image of strength, had leaked his first official patrol route to the press. The result was a citywide spectacle. As Naruto and Mirko leapt from rooftop to rooftop, they were trailed by a swarm of news helicopters, their cameras broadcasting every move to a captivated world. The streets below were lined with crowds of people, their faces turned to the sky, hoping to catch a glimpse of their new, enigmatic number 1. The internet, predictably, was a chaotic mess of awe, speculation, and outright panic. HeroNet news ticker, history in the making, number 1 hero shinobi begins first official patrol with partner Mirko. The world watches. Trending on Chirper, hashtag shinobi debut hashtag Naruto and Mirko hashtag the new number 1. At Quirk Watcher 24, they actually did it. UA graduated a first year. He's officially a pro. The HPSC just broke a century of precedent. This is either the start of a new golden age or the biggest mistake in hero history. Hashtag Shinobi, debut. At Combat Analyst 99, the partnership with Mirko is a stroke of genius, politically. It pairs their most uncontrollable asset with a beloved, established top-tier hero. She's his leash, but she's also his public validator. They're a perfect storm of power and popularity. At Gossip Girl, forget politics, look at them. They move in perfect sync. He's the silent, deadly type, and she's the wild, powerhouse brawler. This isn't a partnership, it's the pilot episode of the coolest new hero show ever. Hashtag power couple hashtag Narumi. They're calling us Narumi, Naruto commented dryly, his senses tracking the helicopters, the crowds, and the ambient energy of the city, all while effortlessly keeping pace with Mirko. "It's cute, right?" Mirko shot back with a feral grin, executing a series of flawless acrobatic flips between buildings. Better than what they call Endeavor. Their patrol was interrupted by a high-level alert. A group of heavily armed villains had taken over a high-rise office building, demanding a massive ransom and safe passage out of the country. They were members of a defunct paramilitary group, armed with illegal, quirk-enhancing technology. "Showtime, rookie," Mirko growled, her eyes blazing. They arrived on the scene to find a tense standoff. The police had the building surrounded, but the villains had hostages and were threatening to blow the entire building. "Standard procedure is to negotiate," the police captain on the scene said as they landed. "We wait them out." "We don't have time for that," Naruto said, his eyes closed as a clone relayed the internal layout of the building to him. 14 villains. 32 hostages. They've wired the entire 40th floor with explosives, tied to a dead man's switch on their leader. The police and other heroes stared at him, stunned by the impossible detail of his intelligence. "So a frontal assault is out," Mirko said, cracking her knuckles. "What's the plan, number one?" "You're the distraction," he said with a wink. "I'm starting to see a pattern here," she grumbled, though she was already grinning. "But this time," he added, "you're the distraction inside." He tossed her a Hiraishin kunai. "I'll teleport you to the 39th floor, right below them. Cause a scene. A big one. Draw their entire force down to you." "And what will you be doing?" she asked. "Winning," he replied. In a yellow flash, Mirko was gone. A moment later, a series of massive explosions rocked the 40th floor as she came up through the floorboards, a one-woman wrecking crew. The villains, panicking, converged on her position, leaving the hostages and their leader momentarily unguarded. While the chaos raged below, Naruto appeared on the 41st floor. He phased through the floor, appearing in the center of the hostage room like a ghost. The villain leader spun around, his hand on the detonator, but Naruto was already there. A single, silent touch to the back of his neck, and the leader crumpled. Naruto's clones appeared, efficiently disarming the bombs and escorting the terrified hostages to safety. Down below, Mirko sent the last villain crashing through a wall. The entire incident was over in less than 5 minutes. The live broadcast captured it all: the impossible teleportation, the overwhelming power of Mirko, and the silent, untouchable efficiency of Naruto. They weren't just a duo, they were a force multiplier, their synergy and power on a level no one had ever seen. That night, the world didn't just see a new number one. They saw a new kind of heroism, a seamless blend of overwhelming power and impossible strategy. The age of All Might was over. The age of the shinobi had begun. The months that followed Naruto's early graduation were a whirlwind of change for Japan. The age of the shinobi, as the media had dubbed it, was characterized by a brutal, almost terrifying efficiency. The crime rate, which had spiked after All Might's retirement, began to plummet. Villains who had grown bold in the power vacuum suddenly found themselves hunted by a duo that moved like ghosts and struck like thunder. The partnership between Shinobi and Mirko, or Narumi as the public affectionately called them, was a thing of legend. They were a perfect, complementary force. Mirko was the public face, the ferocious, charismatic powerhouse who would crash through the front door with a grin. Naruto was the silent, unseen force, the ghost who would dismantle an entire operation from the inside before the villains even knew they were under attack. They took down smuggling rings, dismantled villain factories, and toppled criminal empires with a speed and success rate that was unprecedented. Their public persona was just as captivating. They were a constant presence in the media, their playful banter during interviews and their undeniable chemistry making them the most popular heroes in the country. The Commission's attempt to use Mirko as a leash had backfired spectacularly. Instead, she had become the amplifier for Naruto's quiet charisma, making him not just respected, but beloved. While Naruto was reshaping the hero world, life at UA continued. His former classmates, now in their second semester, were beginning their own work studies. Izuku, under the guidance of All Might's former sidekick Sir Naitai, found himself entangled in a dark, complex investigation into the Yakuza group, the Shihaseikai, and their mysterious leader, Overhaul. Kirishima, interning with Fat Gum, found himself on a similar path. The rest of Class 1A were scattered across the country, learning, growing, and facing their own trials, their stories unfolding in the shadow of their former classmates' meteoric rise. One evening, after a long day that involved dismantling a villain organization that was trying to weaponize Trigger, Naruto and Mirko sat on the roof of her penthouse, eating takeout and looking out at the city. "You know," Mirko said, nudging him with her foot. For a guy who can teleport, you sure do like sitting on roofs. It's quiet, he replied, a small smile on his face. Helps me think. And what's the big brain of the number one hero thinking about tonight? She asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. Something's wrong, he said, his expression turning serious. We've been cutting off the heads of these organizations, but the body keeps twitching. The trigger we confiscated today. The formula was new, more advanced than anything we've seen. Someone new is pulling the strings. Someone smart. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize, but the message was encrypted with a code that only he and Izuku knew. Need to talk. It's about a little girl with horns. And a man who can destroy things with a touch. Be careful. They can erase quirks. Naruto's blood ran cold. Erase quirks. It was a power that mirrored All for One's ability to steal them. This was not a random Yakuza squabble. This was something far more dangerous. He stood up, his gaze distant. I have to go. What is it? Mirko asked, instantly on alert. Trouble? My friends are in it, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He looked at her, a silent apology in his eyes for cutting their night short. She just nodded, her expression one of absolute, unwavering trust. Go, she said. Kick their ass. And when you get back, you're telling me everything. He gave her a grateful smile and then vanished in a yellow flash, leaving her alone on the rooftop. The quiet war he had been fighting in the shadows was about to collide with the one his friends had just stumbled into. And at the center of it all was a little girl with horns. Naruto appeared in a silent flash of yellow light in a darkened, high-tech office. The room was dominated by a massive, floor-to-ceiling collection of All Might memorabilia. Standing in the center of the room were two figures, a pale, shaken Izuku Midoriya, and a tall, impossibly thin man in a suit with sharp, intelligent eyes. This was Sir Nightai, All Might's former sidekick and one of the most respected heroes in Japan. Uzumaki, Sir Nightai said, his voice flat, showing no surprise at Naruto's sudden appearance. I had a 78.4% certainty you would arrive within the next 5 minutes. Your predictability is a weakness. Only if you can do something about it, Naruto countered, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Izuku. You're okay? I'm fine, Izuku said, though his voice trembled slightly. But there's a girl. Her name is Eri. We met her on patrol. Overhaul, the leader of the Shihasekai. He has her. He's using her. Izuku quickly recounted the entire story, the chance encounter in the alley, the fear in Eri's eyes, the way she clung to him before Overhaul took her back, and the subsequent investigation that had led them to a horrifying conclusion. Overhaul's quirk allows him to disassemble and reassemble matter with a touch, Sir Nightai explained, his voice grim. He is using that power on this little girl, breaking down her body and reassembling it, to harvest her blood and tissue. Her quirk, Rewind, allows her to reverse a living thing's state. He is using it to create a permanent quirk-erasing drug. Naruto was silent. His expression, usually so calm and unreadable, had become a mask of ice-cold, unadulterated fury. The story was sickeningly familiar. A child, born with a unique power, being treated not as a person, but as a tool, a resource to be harvested. It was the story of the Jinchuriki, a horror from his own world that he thought he had left behind. We are assembling a team, Sir Nightai continued, watching Naruto's reaction with his analytical gaze. A joint operation of multiple hero agencies to raid the Shihasekai compound and rescue the girl. When? Naruto asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl. As soon as we have a confirmed location and a solid plan, Sir Nightai replied. This is a delicate operation. Overhaul is a master strategist, and his compound is a fortress. No, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument. We're not waiting. He's hurting a child. The plan is simple. I go in, I take the girl, and I dismantle anyone who gets in my way. That is reckless and foolish. Sir Nightai retorted, his composure finally cracking. I have foreseen this. A direct assault will lead to casualties. A hero's death is a possibility. Your foresight didn't account for me, Naruto shot back, his blue eyes blazing with a power that made the number one hero's aura feel like a physical force in the room. You can sit here and plan, and you can predict your futures. I'm going to go make one. He looked at Izuku. Where is their compound? Izuku, caught between his mentor and his best friend, looked torn. But he saw the look in Naruto's eyes, the same look he had seen at the USJ and in Kamino, the look of absolute, unshakable resolve. We think we know, Izuku said, pointing to a map on the wall. But Naruto, we have to do this the right way. We have to go through the proper channels. The proper channels are going to get that little girl killed, Naruto said, his voice softening for a moment as he looked at his friend. I'm not asking you to come with me, Izuku. This is my fight. But I'm going to save her. Tonight. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Get ready. When I'm done, there's going to be a mess to clean up. With that, he vanished in a yellow flash, leaving a stunned Sir Naitai and a terrified, inspired Izuku Midoriya in his wake. The carefully planned, multi-agency hero raid was about to be preempted by a one-man army. The assault on the Shihasekai had begun. The Shihasekai compound was a sprawling, traditional estate, a silent fortress under the pale light of the moon. Naruto appeared at its gates in a whisper of displaced air. He didn't pause. He didn't scout. He simply placed a hand on the ground, closed his eyes, and let his senses expand. He felt it all. The guards patrolling the perimeter. The hidden traps. The complex, maze-like structure of the underground facility. And deep within, a tiny, flickering, terrified spark of life. Eerie. Haju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 100 clones appeared in a silent explosion of smoke. Find her, was his only command. No alarms. No witnesses. The clones scattered, a ghost army melting into the shadows. They moved with a supernatural grace, phasing through walls, bypassing laser grids, and disabling pressure plates with an ease that made the Yakuza's formidable defenses look like a child's playground. Within minutes, a clone's memory flooded his mind, the entrance to the underground labyrinth. Naruto vanished, teleporting to the clone's location deep within the estate. He stood before a hidden elevator, the gateway to his target. As he descended into the earth, the very walls of the complex began to shift and writhe around him, the work of a villain with a terrain-manipulating quirk. The path was constantly changing, a disorienting, shifting maze designed to confuse and trap any intruder. It was a clever defense. It was also completely useless. Guided by the continuous stream of information from his clones, who were now mapping the shifting labyrinth in real time, Naruto moved with an unhurried, purposeful stride. He turned a corner and found his path blocked by two of Overhaul's most powerful subordinates, the 8 Bullets. One was a massive man with a plague doctor's mask, Kendo Rappa, who radiated an aura of pure, unrestrained bloodlust. The other was a stoic man in robes, Hekiji Tengai, who immediately put up a powerful, shimmering barrier. You have come far, intruder, Tengai said, his voice calm. But this is the end of your road. My barrier is absolute. Let me fight him, Rappa roared, his fists clenched. I want to feel his strength. I want a real fight. Naruto didn't even look at them. He could feel Irie's life force, just a few floors below. He didn't have time for this. He entered Sage mode. The orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes, and the air around him grew heavy with the pressure of immense, natural energy. He didn't speak. He didn't make a grand gesture. He simply held out his hand and pushed. A wave of pure, invisible force, a Senjutsu-enhanced chakra push, slammed into the absolute barrier. It didn't just break. It shattered into a million pieces of glittering light. Tengai was sent flying backward, unconscious before he even hit the wall. Rappa stared, his bloodlust momentarily replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated awe. Yes. He breathed. That's it. That's the power I. He never finished the sentence. Naruto appeared in front of him, a blur of motion, and delivered a single, precise chop to the back of his neck. The massive brawler crumpled to the ground, defeated. The entire confrontation had taken less than 5 seconds. Deep in the heart of the facility, in a sterile white laboratory, Kai Chisaki, Overhaul, watched the security monitor, his gloved hands trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He had just watched his 2 strongest guards get neutralized by a single boy who had appeared out of nowhere. The alarms, which should have been screaming, were silent. His fortress had been breached. He looked down at the small, terrified girl with the single horn, Irie, who was strapped to a medical chair. It seems we have a guest, he hissed. The reinforced steel door to the laboratory suddenly buckled inward, torn from its hinges by a swirling blue sphere of energy. The Rasengan dissipated, and Naruto Uzumaki stepped through the ruined doorway, his eyes glowing with a cold, righteous fury. He looked at the terrified girl, at the needles and medical equipment, and then his gaze landed on Overhaul. The game is over, Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous promise. Let the girl go. Now. Overhaul stared at the boy who had just breached his inner sanctum, his calm demeanor cracking under the weight of this impossible intrusion. You are filthy, he hissed, his visible eye twitching with rage. You have brought the sickness of the outside world into my clean room. For that, you will be disassembled. He slammed his bare hand onto the floor. The sterile white tiles erupted, transforming into a tidal wave of jagged, concrete spikes that shot across the room, aiming to impale Naruto where he stood. But Naruto was already gone. He moved with a speed that was faster than thought, a golden blur of sage mode energy. He appeared beside the medical chair, his hand gently breaking the restraints holding Eri. In the same fluid motion, he scooped the terrified, trembling girl into his arms and leapt to the far side of the room, landing silently as the wave of spikes crashed against the wall behind them. "It's okay," Naruto whispered to the girl in his arms, his voice a soft, gentle rumble that cut through her fear. "I've got you. You're safe now." He gently set her down behind him, creating a single, solid clone to stand guard over her. "Close your eyes, Eri. It'll be over soon." Overhaul watched, his mind reeling. The boy hadn't just dodged, he had performed a rescue in the middle of a lethal attack. "How?" Overhaul demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of fury and confusion. "How can you move through this filth and not be tainted?" "What you call filth, I call a battlefield," Naruto replied, his gaze never leaving the villain. "And what you're doing to this child? It's more than a sickness. It's a sin. You understand nothing." Overhaul shrieked, his composure completely shattering. "Quirks are a disease. They have infected humanity, turning us into mindless beasts. This girl. She is the cure. Her power will allow me to erase this plague and return the world to its pure, quirkless state. She is a sacrifice for a greater good." He tore off his gloves, his eyes wild with fanatical conviction. He slammed his hands together, and the entire room began to deconstruct and reconstruct around him, the walls and floor twisting into a monstrous, shifting golem of concrete and steel, with Overhaul at its heart. "I will erase you," the monstrous form of Overhaul boomed, "and then I will continue my work." Naruto just watched the grand, terrifying transformation, his expression unchanged. He raised one hand, and a massive, swirling sphere of blue energy, far larger and more violent than any he had shown before, spun to life in his palm. The sound of the giant Rasengan was a deafening, high-pitched scream that seemed to tear at the very air. "You talk about a cure," Naruto said, his voice resonating with the power of sage mode. "But you are the disease." He didn't charge. He simply threw it. The giant Rasengan shot across the room, not as a projectile, but as a self-sustaining vortex of pure, grinding power. It met the charging stone golem, and there was no grand explosion. There was only annihilation. The concrete and steel of Overhaul's monstrous form were not broken, they were ground into fine, gray dust. The Rasengan tore through the makeshift body and slammed into the real Overhaul at its center. Kaichisaki's world became a silent, grinding vortex of blue light. His quirk, the power to disassemble and reassemble, was useless against a power that was pure, destructive rotation. He was being unmade. The Rasengan dissipated, and what was left of Overhaul crumpled to the floor, his body broken, his arms and legs twisted at unnatural angles. He was alive, but he would never fight again. His quirk, and his ambition, had been permanently disassembled. The laboratory was silent, save for the quiet, hitching sobs of a little girl who was finally free. It was at that moment that the heroes arrived. Sir Nitai, Izuku, Mirio, and the others burst into the ruined lab, ready for the fight of their lives, only to find the battle already over. They stared at the defeated Yakuza boss, the destroyed laboratory, and the boy in the white flak jacket, who was now kneeling, his back to them, speaking in a soft, gentle voice to the crying child he had just saved. The war was over before they had even fired a shot. Sir Nitai stood frozen in the ruined doorway, his analytical mind, which had foreseen the deaths of heroes and the outcomes of 1,000 battles, completely short-circuiting. The future he had predicted, a bloody, Pyrrhic victory that would have cost the life of Mirio Tagata, had been rendered utterly irrelevant. The battle was over. The villain was defeated. The girl was safe. And it had all been accomplished by a single boy, a variable that had not just altered his predictions but had shattered them completely. Naruto paid the stunned heroes no mind. His entire focus was on the small, trembling girl in front of him. He slowly reached out, not to his flak jacket or a weapon, but to the small, single horn on her forehead. He gently touched it. "Does this hurt?" he asked, his voice soft. Eri flinched at his touch but then looked up at him, her large, red eyes wide with a confusion that was slowly being replaced by a dawning, fragile hope. She shook her head. "Good," Naruto said with a small, gentle smile. "It's a part of you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of it." He slowly stood up, holding out his hand. "Come on. Let's get you out of here. I know a place where they have great candy apples." The simple, childish offer was so jarringly normal, so completely out of place in the sterile, ruined laboratory, that it seemed to break the spell. Eri looked at his outstretched hand, then at the unconscious form of Overhaul, and then back at the boy with the kind, sad eyes. For the first time in her memory, someone was offering her a choice that wasn't pain. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her small, bandaged hand in his. It was at that moment that the rest of the world caught up. Police and other pro-heroes began to flood into the underground facility, their expressions shifting from battle-ready determination to stunned disbelief as they took in the scene. "The target has been neutralized," Sir Nightai finally said, his voice regaining its professional calm, though his eyes never left Naruto. "Secure the prisoner. And get a medical team for the girl." As the paramedics gently took Eri, who refused to let go of Naruto's hand, Sir Nightai approached him. "Uzumaki," he began, his voice a low, intense murmur. "What you did here today. It was reckless. You ignored established protocols and engaged a high-level threat alone. You jeopardized a coordinated hero operation. And I won," Naruto replied simply, his gaze unwavering. "The girl is safe. The villain is defeated. The mission is a success. The rest is just paperwork." Sir Nightai stared at him, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. He had seen the future. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this path should have led to death and tragedy. But this boy had walked into the future he had foreseen and had simply rewritten it. "You have changed fate today, Naruto Uzumaki," Sir Nightai said, his voice a whisper of pure awe. "I don't know what you are. But the world is safer for it." As they emerged from the compound into the flashing lights of police cars and ambulances, Naruto saw a familiar, furious figure waiting for him. Mirko stood by an ambulance, her arms crossed, a look of profound relief warring with an equally profound desire to kick him into the next prefecture. "You absolute, reckless, suicidal idiot," she growled as he approached, her voice a low, dangerous purr. She grabbed the front of his flak jacket, pulling him close. "I turn my back for 5 minutes, and you go and start a one-man war with the Yakuza. I told you I'd handle it," he said with a small, tired smile. She stared at him for a long moment, her red eyes searching his face. Then, her anger seemed to melt away, replaced by a fierce, protective warmth. "Yeah," she said, her voice softening. "You did." She didn't let go of his jacket. "Don't you ever do that to me again, you hear me?" "No promises," he replied. She just shook her head, a small, exasperated smile on her face. The Shihasekai arc was over. The quirk-erasing drugs were secured. A little girl was safe. The aftermath of the Shihasekai raid was a quiet, clinical affair, a stark contrast to the explosive, public fallout of the Kamino incident. The operation was a resounding success, the Yakuza group was dismantled, the quirk-erasing drugs were secured, and most importantly, Eri was safe. But the victory was a complicated one, achieved not by a coordinated hero raid, but by the unsanctioned, unilateral action of the number one hero. In a sterile white room in Hasu General Hospital, Eri sat on a bed, a candy apple held untouched in her small hands. She was surrounded by doctors and heroes, but her eyes were fixed on the only person in the room she trusted, Naruto, who sat quietly in a chair by her bedside. Her quirk was unstable, a volatile power that could rewind a person out of existence with a single touch. But when she had accidentally touched Naruto, nothing had happened. His chakra, a force of life from another world, was anathema to her power, acting as a natural, calming anchor. He was the only one who could be near her without fear. Aizawa and Principal Nezu stood in the doorway, observing the scene. "The commission wants to take her, to turn her into a research subject," Nezu said, his voice a low, serious murmur. "We cannot allow that." "She'll stay with us," Aizawa stated, his voice firm. "I'll take responsibility for her. She's been through enough. She deserves a chance at a normal life." "A normal life will be difficult," Nezu countered. "But a safe one. That, we can provide. She will be placed under UA's care." Later that day, in Sir Nightai's now repaired office, the man who had foreseen the future was having a cup of tea with the man whose future he had foreseen. Toshinori Yagi, in his skeletal form, looked at his former sidekick, a decade of guilt and regret between them. "You were right, Mirai," Yagi said, his voice a quiet rasp. "I was a fool to ignore your warning. I should have listened." "No," Sir Nightai replied, his gaze fixed on the All Might poster that still adorned his wall. "I was the fool. I saw a single, possible future and treated it as an immutable fact. I was so obsessed with preventing your death that I failed to see the possibilities for life." He turned to Yagi, a new, humbled light in his eyes. "That boy, Uzumaki. He did not just defeat a villain. He defeated fate itself. He proved me wrong. And in doing so, he saved us all. The rift between the two old friends, a chasm carved by prophecy and pride, finally began to close. That night, Naruto stood on the familiar rooftop of Mirko's penthouse. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of peaceful, ignorant stars. He heard her land behind him, a soft thud of powerful feet. "I heard you played bodyguard to a little girl all day," she said, her voice a low, teasing drawl as she came to stand beside him. "Getting soft in your old age, number one?" "Someone has to," he replied, a small, tired smile on his face. "The HPSC is in an uproar, you know," she continued, leaning against the railing. "You went off book, ignored a dozen protocols, and single-handedly took down one of the most dangerous Yakuza groups in the country. They don't know whether to give you a medal or put you in a cage." "Probably both," he said with a sigh. She was silent for a moment, her usual fiery energy replaced by a quiet, serious warmth. "You did a good thing, Naruto," she said softly. "You saved that kid." "It's my job," he replied. "No," she said, turning to face him, her red eyes intense in the city lights. "It's more than that for you, isn't it?" He didn't answer. He just looked out at the city, the weight of 100 memories, of another life, in his eyes. She didn't press. She just stood there with him, a silent, comforting presence. "So," she said, finally breaking the silence, a playful smirk returning to her face. "Now that you've saved the world again, I believe we're owed a rain check on that date. And this time, no world-ending threats are allowed to interrupt. Deal?" "Deal," he said, a genuine, warm smile finally reaching his eyes. Their rain check happened 2 nights later. Naruto, having given a clone his credit card and a vague instruction to find someplace nice, was surprised when it led him to a quiet, ridiculously exclusive restaurant tucked away in a high-rise garden, overlooking the entire city. Mirko was already there, not in her hero costume, but in a simple, elegant black dress that did little to hide the powerful muscles of her back and shoulders. She looked up as he approached, a slow, appreciative smirk on her face. "Not bad, pretty boy," she commented, gesturing to the view. "You clean up nice." "You're not so bad yourself," he replied, sliding into the chair opposite her. "I wasn't sure you owned anything that wasn't spandex." "Ha! I've got a closet full of surprises," she shot back with a wink. "So, this is what a date with the number one hero looks like, huh? Fancy food, nice view. Any Yakuza strongholds we need to raid between the appetizer and the main course?" "I gave the clones the night off," he said with a chuckle. "Tonight, it's just us." The words hung in the air for a moment, simple but carrying a new weight. The easy banter, the playful challenges, it was all still there, but underneath it was a new current, a comfortable intimacy they were both cautiously exploring. They talked for hours. She told him about the ridiculous new PR campaign the HPSC was trying to force on her. "They want me to have a cute rabbit sidekick named Hoppy. I told them I'd sooner eat my own foot." He, in turn, shared a heavily edited story about a friend who had a bad habit of accidentally peeking into women's bathhouses, a tale that made her laugh so loud the other patrons stared. "So, what's the deal with the little unicorn?" Mirko asked, her expression turning serious as she swirled the wine in her glass. "The girl, Eri. I heard she's under UA's protection now." "She is," Naruto confirmed, his own mood sobering. "Her quirk is volatile. It rewinds people. But for some reason, it doesn't affect me. Aizawa-sensei thinks my quirk acts as an anchor for her. So, I've been assigned as her unofficial bodyguard." "The number one hero, reduced to babysitting duty," she said, though there was no mockery in her voice. "Tough break." "It's not a break," he said quietly, his gaze distant. "I know what it's like. To have a power inside you that you can't control, that makes people afraid of you." He looked at her, and for a moment, the ancient weariness in his eyes was on full display. No child should have to go through that alone. Mirko was silent. She had built her entire career on being the toughest, the fastest, the most ferocious. She met every challenge with a grin and a kick. But this quiet, painful vulnerability from the most powerful person she had ever met. It was a side of him she hadn't expected. And it was a side she found herself wanting to protect. "Well," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "She's lucky she's got you, then." She raised her glass. "To the babysitter." He smiled, a real, warm smile that reached his eyes, and clinked his glass against hers. "To the babysitter." Their peaceful dinner was inevitably interrupted. Not by a villain attack, but by the buzzing of Naruto's phone. It was a summons from a number he didn't recognize, but the authority in the encrypted message was clear. The president of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Trouble in paradise? Mirko asked, raising an eyebrow. The boss wants to see me, he said with a sigh. I guess the paperwork from the raid finally caught up to me. The HPSC are a bunch of paper-pushing cowards, she scoffed. Want me to come with you? I'm great at intimidating people in suits. Tempting, he said with a grin. But this is a conversation I need to have alone. He stood up, tossing a black credit card onto the table. This should cover it. Don't wait up. Hey, she said, catching his hand before he could leave. Her grip was firm, her red eyes serious. You watch your back with them, you hear me? They're more dangerous than any villain. I know, he said, his voice a low, reassuring murmur. I'll be fine. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze and then vanished in a yellow flash, leaving her alone with the glittering city lights. She looked at the empty chair, a strange, unfamiliar feeling churning in her gut. It was worry. And she hated it. Naruto reappeared in a sterile, opulent office high in the HPSC headquarters. The woman sitting behind the massive desk was the same one from the meeting after the sports festival, her face a mask of cold, political calculation. Uzumaki-san, the president began, her voice devoid of any warmth. Thank you for coming on such short notice. You didn't give me much of a choice, he replied, his hands in his pockets as he surveyed the room. Your actions at the Shihaseikai compound were effective, she conceded. But they were also unsanctioned, reckless, and a flagrant violation of a dozen hero laws. You destabilized a multi-agency operation. And I saved a child's life and stopped a new, weaponized drug from hitting the streets, he countered, his voice flat. The mission was a success. The rest is semantics. The president's eyes narrowed. It is not semantics when it comes to public perception and the rule of law. You are a symbol, whether you like it or not. And symbols must be controlled. She slid a file across the desk. We have a problem. All for One's successor, Tomura Shigaraki, is still at large. The League of Villains is regrouping. Our intelligence suggests they're planning something big, a move to destabilize society itself. She looked him dead in the eye. We need a weapon to counter that threat. We need you. But we cannot have our primary weapon going off on its own, starting private wars whenever it feels the impulse. From now on, you will operate under the direct command of a commission-appointed handler. You will be given specific missions, specific targets. You will be our scalpel. Naruto was silent for a long moment. He looked at the file, at the woman's cold, determined face. He understood the game she was playing. This wasn't about public safety. It was about control. They wanted to put a leash on the one thing in the world they couldn't predict. No, he said simply. The president's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. No? I don't think you understand, boy. This is not a request. And I don't think you understand, Naruto replied, his voice dropping, the pressure in the room suddenly becoming immense. The playful teenager was gone, replaced by the cage who had stared down gods. I am not your weapon. I am not your scalpel. And I am not your symbol. He walked to the massive window, looking down at the city he had sworn to protect. I will stop Shigaraki. I will defeat whatever threats are coming. But I will do it my way. With my team. He turned back to her, his blue eyes blazing with a power that had nothing to do with a quirk. I am a hero. Not a soldier. And you would do well to remember the difference. With that, he vanished, leaving the most powerful woman in Japan alone in her office, trembling with a mixture of fury and, for the first time in her life, genuine fear. She had tried to cage a tiger, and the tiger had just reminded her that it had claws. The game was on. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.